Okay, Council, we're good on YouTube.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Colleagues, it being 3:01, I will call the Township of Selwyn Special Council meeting to order for Tuesday, June the 15th, 2021. I'd like to let members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council be advised that the meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. On that point, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. First of all, from time to time, we're having some connectivity difficulties. So if counselors are experiencing that, perhaps if you could turn off your camera and just keep the audio on, that's preferable to being knocked off the meeting. So I'll leave it to counselors to deal with that. Second of all, to our guests, you are if you're on now, you are in the waiting room, which means that you can observe the proceedings, but you cannot activate your microphone or your camera to be seen. When your delegation or your intervention time comes, then Tanya will be doing her magic with the technology, and you will be brought into the meeting in a way that you can speak and be seen. So that's the process. So if you're in the waiting room, don't worry, Tanya is on it and will be able to put you into the meeting at the appropriate time. Just before we get started, colleagues, a couple things. So first of all is to ask if there are any declaration of pecuniary interest. And Madam Clerk, there was none noted. So just a couple of opening comments. First of all, thank you everybody for participating. The meeting tonight is roughly divided into four parts. The first part of this meeting will be the consultant's presentation, which we're going to get to in a minute. I'm going to ask the consultant to go through their full presentation, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues on council to ask any questions or make any comments that are directly related to the material that will be presented to us by the consultant. When that portion is over, and I expect that will take a bit of time to go through the report and answer the questions of council, we will be taking a 15-minute break. So at that point, I will adjourn the meeting for 15 minutes, and that will allow council members and others to either grab a bite to eat or take a bit of a rest. The second part of the meeting will begin after that. These are delegations and deputations. These will happen much in the same manner as we're used to in our normal meetings. There will be a 10-minute presentation for those people who are presenting. I will give you a warning at 9 minutes that you're getting close to the end, and if you haven't finished at 10 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap it up. I would ask that everybody abide by and respect the timelines that have been provided. After each delegation, council members will have an opportunity to ask the presenters a question or questions, and that I ask again that council members remain on topic for that particular delegation. After that part of the meeting is completed, we'll have a second break, this time a shorter one, 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll go to the third part of the meeting, which is our public engagement. This is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. This is a result of COVID. So we're not able to assemble in person. So we have had 7 individuals who wish to speak that have been registered. Each of those individuals will be provided 5 minutes. I will advise you at 4.5 that you're getting close to your time, and I would ask that you wrap up at 5 minutes. At 5 minutes, please complete your comments. If you haven't completed your comments, then I'm going to ask Tanya to move on to the next presenter. So there are 7 registered speakers. There are no questions in this part of the presentation. The fourth part of our meeting will be the summary part. I'm going to provide an opportunity for each one of my council colleagues to provide any closing comments if they wish to. Don't feel that you're obligated to do so if you've made all the comments you have wanted to in the first part of the meeting. I will then myself at the end attempt to summarize the evening and what we've heard and speak briefly to next steps. And just before we get on with our consultant, I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, and to state the obvious, this is an issue that creates much passion in people on various sides of the debate. As I've said in the past, and I will continue to say, we will work very hard to hear everyone's perspective. No opinion is more important than another. And it's our intention today to be listening to those opinions. I would ask that the presenters work hard to present their facts and to present their opinions and to make a distinction between those two things. I implore everybody, regardless of whether you're on council or whether you're making presentations, to be courteous and respectful to each other. That is the only way that we can conduct business. And I'm going to say right up front, if anybody, any individual presenting attacks the professional integrity of staff or the consultant, I will immediately intervene. Please, everybody, treat everybody else with respect. Having said that, we'll move on to the first part of our evening, and that is our consultant's report, going to be presented by Anand to start with. I don't know whether your colleagues are going to assist you, but the floor is yours. Please go through your whole presentation and then I'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell and members of council for having me. It is myself on the panel today. We have others from the office joining us on the live stream, but by and large, I'll be available to answer any questions following my presentation. I'm just sharing my screen right now. And if for some reason I've spoken to Tanya in advance, we had that glitch the last time. It's never happened before, but if for some reason I'm speaking to slides that are not the slides on the screen, somebody do please let me know and we'll work to rectify that situation. So again, thank you very much for convening this special meeting of council to discuss the Lakefield Campground Utilization Study. Through this presentation, we will present key findings from our draft study. Please note that it is not our intent to revisit all of the information previously presented to council on May 5th, but we would be pleased to go over any such information through the Q&A if members of council have any specific questions or comments. So as a reminder, the Lakefield Campground Utilization Study provides Township Council and staff with a recommended future operational model for the Lakefield Campground. It builds on the service delivery review for the Parks and Recreation Department that previously identified 5 options for the township to consider for the campground. And once council endorses a preferred operating model, township staff will begin the process of assessing the steps required to fulfill implementation, including any costs, organizational implications, engagement of prospective partners and stakeholders, and any site works as deemed appropriate. It bears noting that the township's terms of reference for this study focuses on the operational model for the campground, but does not involve defining a new vision for Hague Point as a whole. As mentioned earlier, operational and technical assessments relating to site conditions, staffing, pricing, partnership discussions, and economic impact analysis would need to occur through separate studies should the township wish to pursue these types of investigations. The project was initiated this past February, and a number of research and consultation tasks have been completed that have resulted in the draft study before you today. As a reminder, the timing of this study was established in anticipation of the current operating agreement coming to an end in October 2022 in order to leave sufficient time to investigate and implement the operating model that is ultimately chosen. Our next steps will be to consider feedback provided through the ongoing public commenting period and council's input today as we finalize the study in advance of the July 19th presentation to council. Since our last meeting with council, we have considered feedback through 55 individual submissions, though a number of additional submissions have been received over the past week that will be reviewed as part of the study finalization process. Whereas written submissions were more weighted to a park vision initially, more of the recent submissions are in support of keeping the campground. And now we find that in terms of at least written submissions, we find that the numbers are relatively equal. In response to one of the questions read aloud at the May 5th meeting, we would like to clarify a point because we weren't able to speak during that portion of the meeting. But we would like to clarify that we had not overlooked the Bob Cajun campground conversion, but rather we had understood that its end use was not something we thought Selwyn was interested in pursuing at that time. Therefore, we contacted Kawartha Lakes to discuss the $7.6 million redevelopment project of their former campground to a high-intensity urban-oriented park and have added that reference into the campground study as was requested. Township staff have also been in touch with qualified engineers and contractors to obtain cost estimates associated with infrastructure replacement, and those have been worked into the report as well. And so along with these changes, we have revised the evaluation criteria used to assess the study options and have prepared the draft study for review by council and the public. Next, we will speak to the existing context in which the campground is presently operating. As a reminder,
Hi, sorry to
yeah.
interrupt. Just wondering if you could make your screen full screen, because at the moment we can see the
notes?
The notes, yeah.
Okay, let me. All right. Okay, that's strange. Again, there's always something, it seems, with our meetings these days. So I'll just go off this so folks can see the whole screen. So as a reminder from the previous meeting with council, the Lakefield Campground is one of hundreds of municipally owned campgrounds across Canada. And thus the township is not alone in providing this level of service. We are aware of certain municipalities that have recently closed campgrounds, but are also aware of others, such as the City of Cornwall, that are considering adding new campgrounds to their core service portfolio. The research points to growth in the camping industry at the national, provincial, and regional levels even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Industry reports and trends papers point to more people trying out camping in recent years, including through culturally diverse populations, millennials, and families with young children. Hague Point, so more specifically in terms of the site that we're looking at, Hague Point is situated in between the Autonomy River and the Lakefield Marsh. In addition to the campground, Hague Point contains the Lakefield Beach, Douglas Sports Center, and a small residential component, as well as a portion of the Imagine the Marsh conservation lands. The campground is permitted use under the County of Peterborough official plan. The Lakefield Campground has a total of 128 sites, plus space for overflow. The campground's electrical and water infrastructure was installed approximately 45 years ago, and certain components are in need of replacement. Since 2019, the Lakefield Campground has contributed an average of $52,000 per year to the municipal operating budget. A portion of these revenues are used to subsidize other Parks and Recreation Department services that operate below a break-even point. Discussions with and submissions from the Township's Economic Development and Business Committee, the Kawartha Chamber of Commerce, campers themselves, and certain members of the public suggest that the campground is important in supporting businesses in Lakefield. The township has some choices when it comes to renewing campground infrastructure. The sanitary sewer main has been found to be in good condition, and thus improvements would largely be relegated to the water main, sanitary sewer laterals and risers, and electrical upgrades should the township wish to increase amperage to sites. The estimated cost would be in the range of $672,000 to $721,000, depending upon the infrastructure that is replaced or upgraded and the area of the campground in which those infrastructure improvements are carried out. Again, as noted earlier, these quotes were provided by professional engineers and qualified contractors. The slides that follow will highlight much of what was presented to Council on May 5th, but it provides some helpful context into the study's subsequent needs assessments. As a reminder, the study involved a community survey, workshops with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and Trails Committee, as well as the Economic Development and Business Committee, along with interviews and submissions received from project stakeholders, including Imagine the Marsh. Again, each consultation technique is a distinct tool, and feedback should be viewed in conjunction with other consultation initiatives and other study inputs. Any person wishing to provide comments specific to the draft campground study has the ability to do so until June 25th, after which the study will be finalized and come back to Council for consideration in July. So with respect to the community survey, over 1,300 responses were collected over its 4-week period. And since camping is a service historically facilitated through the township, the survey explored the degree to which people camp in general. It found that 65% take more than 2 camping trips in a year, while about 1 in 3 respondents either do not camp or are infrequent campers. To better understand future plans, the survey found that 69% plan to camp the same or more after the pandemic is over, while 31% plan to camp less or not camp at all. The survey asked whether respondents would support retaining the Lakefield Campground or converting it to parkland. The pie chart on the right-hand side of the screen shows that 54% of the sample supports retaining the campground operations in some form, while 43% would like the entire campground to be converted to parkland. Levels of support and opposition for each study option revealed some notable findings. 35% would support a decision for the township to no longer offer a campground as a municipal service at Hank Point. Between 24 and 28% supported retaining a campground, but we would note that although there was greater support for decommissioning the campground than choices focused on retaining operations, it is possible that the multiple options for retaining the campground may have split results. And as possible evidence of this, there were similar levels of support and opposition recorded for the should not be a campground model at 35 and 37%. Which stands in contrast to the greater deviation shown for the 2 campground operating models. Notable points, again, just as a reminder from the previous meeting in May, notable points from the advisory committees and stakeholder discussions generally focused upon the fact that the Orca managed campgrounds seemed to represent a compromise. There were differing views on how much public access the campground affords versus how much public access a public park would attract based on interests, persons with disabilities, and so forth. And also that the degree of environmental impact that campground operations contribute and the willingness of certain campers to better understand their role in sustainability were raised with us. The following slides will present a high-level overview of the 3 options that Council has tasked us with reviewing, consisting of the competitive bid, outsourcing campground operations to Orca, and ceasing campground operations options. Please note that 2 of the study options originally contained in the 2020 service delivery review for the Parks and Rec Department are no longer being contemplated based on past decisions of Council. To help standardize evaluations between the 3 options, we developed a number of study criteria that are grouped into 6 categories as follows: fiscal and economic, environmental and sustainability, public transparency and accountability, business operations, township staffing implications, and integration with public service potential. So to start with option one, which was the competitive bid option, this option is similar to the model that, again, has been employed over the past 25 years, but provides an opportunity to start fresh with a new agreement that encompasses the township's current values and expectations. From a fiscal and economic standpoint, this option would result in a continued revenue stream that the township could reinvest in public assets or subsidize other municipal services. The operator would continue to be responsible for administrative and management costs, and there would be a retention of economic spin-offs and tourist spending directly attributable to campground operations. But as we noted earlier, there are infrastructure costs that would still be required to be expended if the campground were to be retained in perpetuity. From an environmental and sustainability perspective, there is potential for non-compliance with municipal environmental expectations. Sorry. The private operator may be less flexible in allowing the general public to walk through. From a public transparency and accountability perspective, there is a municipal procurement process in place to ensure fair evaluation of bids, but an operator may not be required to provide all business information to the public, and customer service would be the sole responsibility of the operator. There is also the potential for an operator to prematurely withdraw from the agreement for financial reasons, for example. From a business operations standpoint, from that categorization, as I mentioned, there is an opportunity to refresh the operating agreement and increase benefits received by the township. A core level of service that has been provided for the past 70 years would continue to be retained. The model would be consistent with what is in the Recreation Services Plan and supports the Parks and Rec Department's indirect service delivery model. An operator might be able to employ innovative practices and is nimble enough to respond to changes in a competitive market. But the township's ability to influence decisions would largely be relegated to before the operating agreement is reached, and provisions or conditions that the township imposes through that agreement might affect the potential pool of bidders. From a staffing implications perspective, it could be expected to be fairly similar as present, so a fairly nominal day-to-day staffing commitment on the part of the township, and associated costs would be similar. An operator and the campers would continue to provide indirect supervision of the park, essentially eyes on the park. There is an onus, though, on the operator to demonstrate that it has the required staffing capacity and expertise to manage the campground well on the township's behalf. We would see limited integration potential with other municipal services, again, unless that operator approached you as a township with ideas, or vice versa, but both parties would have to be amenable to that. In terms of study option number 2, which would be outsourcing campground operations to ORCA, so Autonomy Region Conservation Authority. Again, many of the same fiscal and economic considerations as previously presented, in that revenue streams would be retained. The ORCA would be responsible for day-to-day administrative and management tasks. ORCA, where we see a strong benefit in terms of what we've heard through the public consultations, with some concerns being expressed about environmental impacts of the campground. ORCA's mandate is such that the conservation area or authority is likely to meet or exceed the township's environmental protection goals. And again, being the owners of the Imagine the Marsh, ORCA is likely to operate the campground in a sustainable manner, again, in line with its core mandate. From a transparency and accountability perspective, just like yourselves, Orca is a public agency. It is governed by a board of directors that includes elected officials from across its jurisdiction. Mechanisms are in place, therefore, to ensure transparency and accountability in decision making and budgeting. There is a less likelihood that Orca would, then compared to a private operator, that Orca would unexpectedly withdraw from an agreement, particularly for financial reasons. It is worth noting, though, that there are recent changes to the provincial funding model for conservation authorities, which may create some longer term uncertainty that we just need to take into consideration. Again, many of the same considerations from a business operations standpoint as with the competitive bid option, although the township has a historical working relationship with Orca, and Orca has demonstrated experience in managing and operating campgrounds, including one of which is owned by a municipality at the Beaver Mead Campground in Peterborough. As a government agency, Orca might be less nimble than a private sector operator to respond immediately to changes in market conditions. A point that is worth noting in terms of Orca's existing campgrounds, they are primarily geared to transient or overnight rentals and do not permit year-round storage of trailers, from what we understand. One thing that we have heard from the community, certain members of the community, is that with a private operator, at least under the current terms, there has been a customer service benefit by being able to consistently access the same staff person. And so just due to the nature of Orca's staffing structure, campers may not have a single point of contact. But again, those are things that will be need to be discussed with the Conservation Authority. Again, similar staffing implications to the township as at present time, but Orca may be able to generate some internal efficiencies that help the bottom line through its own staffing and expertise. There are economies of scale there. And with Orca already having public programs in place, there may be an opportunity to extend things like environmental education or stewardship type of programs into campground operations, and also then complement municipal services that are available either at Hague Point or nearby. With Orca's experience in boating and small watercraft and associated rentals, there may be potential to generate new revenue streams there as well. So with respect to option 3 of our study, ceasing campground operations altogether, largely the greatest fiscal benefit would be cost avoidance of replacing that campground infrastructure. That said, there would be a cost of site decommissioning and redevelopment. Some of those would, at least the decommissioning, would be one-time costs, whereas infrastructure might have an ongoing cost commitment associated with that. But truly, benefits would depend on the end use. There would be or could be a potential impact on taxes from loss of campground revenue, and it would eliminate economic spin-offs directly attributable to campers unless that end use offsets this loss. From an environmental and sustainability perspective, again, a strong, factor in this consideration is, depending on the end use, assuming it was a more passive or natural-oriented park, it could help result in long-term protection of Hague Point. An active park and investments in public amenities could attract greater use, but also, again, depending on that end use, there are potential for negative impacts if that end use is more intensive or detrimental than the campground operations. A passive park could result in a similar level of use if it is not accessible or of interest to all populations. So again, depending on the number of people that are coming through and their impact on that property, there is a potential for benefit or impact. With the township under this scenario retaining ownership of the lands and presumably maintaining the lands, there would be strong accountability for the public, as they would have access to municipal council and staff. And any kind of reimagination of that site would be guided by council and staff, potentially through another planning process. From a business operations, really, it depends again on the end use. However, one would need to consider that we are removing an established core service if this were to happen. There would be a negative impact on campground users, and the fact that this is largely a permanent action. Decommissioning and demolishing campground infrastructure, once it's gone, it would be expensive to rebuild. And therefore it could potentially be cost prohibitive to convert the lands back to a campground if the end use, the new end use, does not meet the township's expectations or objectives. From a staffing perspective, again, depending on the end use, it can be reasonably presumed that township would assume the daily maintenance and supervision of the lands and enforcement of those lands, for illegal or undesirable activities such as encampments, unauthorized motor vehicles and such. We are seeing those types of issues crop up in a number of municipalities across the province. And so those costs of supervision, enforcement, and maintenance could reasonably be expected to be greater than those incurred at present time, again, due to the fact that right now we have the campground operator and eyes on the park from the campers themselves. So having said or run through the operations or the options, the preferred option has to outsource campground operations to Orca has been identified on the basis of an ability to mitigate environmental concerns. So again, Orca's environmental focused mandate, and it can realistically be believed that they can address environmental concerns that have been identified to date through public comments. The proven experience, Orca already has the requisite organizational infrastructure and systems in place, along with that demonstrated experience that increases the likelihood of a seamless transition to a new campground operator and positions ongoing campground operations for success. A continuity of service would be maintained to campground visitors and the businesses that rely upon them. There would continue to be that retention of economic benefit, and it is plausible that the campground would generate greater economic benefits, particularly for the local food and retail sector, than would a park-based use. While this will depend on the type of park, a passive use, environmentally focused park, or a park serving a highly localized catchment area would be unlikely to create the same tourist market or resident spending. There is a positive revenue generation potential, whereby the continuity of and potential to increase revenues received by the township can be expected under a new agreement. This would retain the ability to use net operating profits from campground operations to subsidize other municipal services. Ceasing operations could reduce all or a portion of those operating profits and have a tax impact. And in terms of reinvesting in community assets, a degree of public accountability and ability to reinvest proceeds from operations exists back into local and regional assets. In the event that the township is unable to reach an agreement with Orca to manage the campground, it is recommended that the township then would go to implement option number 1, which was the competitive bid process. In that way, the township again could craft that terms of reference, continuing to provide that campground offers greater flexibility to adjust to future circumstances than would otherwise be afforded if it were permanently closed. Issuing an RFP or expression of interest would result in potentially a larger applicant pool or proponent pool. And therefore that greater competition may result in the township being able to negotiate a higher annual revenue contribution, or again, other expectations that it sees as a positive for itself. And as we mentioned, retaining the campground will presumably generate greater revenues and reduce tax impact than if converted to passive parkland. So this slide presents a decision tree that originates from two fundamental questions: whether a campground should continue to be provided at Hag Point, and whether council is willing to reinvest in its aging infrastructure. If the answer is yes to both of those questions, township staff would engage Orca to confirm their interest and discuss the potential operating arrangement. And again, in the event that that agreement cannot be reached, then the township would open up to other prospective operators through that competitive bidding process. Should council no longer wish to operate a campground and cease operations, it would presumably be doing so on the basis that it is assured that the economic and environmental benefits, potential tax impacts of removing a historical revenue stream, and costs of decommissioning and redeveloping the site would be offset by demonstrated community benefits resulting from the new end use. Accordingly, a new vision for the campground lands would need to be established prior to implementing that vision for the future. Again, assuming that council proceeds with the preferred option identified through this study, there are a number of steps that will need to take place prior to the 2023 camping season. The first of which, again, would be engaging Orca to confirm their interest and discussing areas of common interest and alignment, the anticipated roles and responsibilities, and expected outcomes. Based on those initial discussions and again, approval from both parties, a draft operating agreement or memorandum of understanding would be prepared and presented to Township Council and the Orca Board of Directors, and we'd envision that happening towards the end of this year. Again, after any refinements of that draft, a final operating agreement or MOU would be presented to Council and the Orca Board for their approval. And if agreement is not reached or approved, then the township would again initiate that RFP or expression of interest. But assuming approval to proceed is received from both parties, the carrying out necessary site works and improvements to the campground would occur in kind of mid 2022 to kind of early 2023. And then in the spring of 2023, that's when Orca or a private sector operator would be assuming management of the campground. Just the last couple of slides here now. Some key considerations that should be explored as part of a new operating agreement are as follows. So really, again, determining the total number of campsites to be provided, along with the mix of seasonal and or transient campsites, ensuring provisions to ensure that the ability to book the campsite is equitable and fair from a public standpoint, determining how to address campers' property, along with if or how to treat off-season storage, whether there needs to be a phase-in period to allow campers to adapt to new operating policies and practices. Again, from just ensuring through the agreement that it is clear that municipal values and expectations with respect to the campground in being compatible with the environment that surrounds it will be important. Discussing and identifying the responsibilities for upfront and ongoing contributions to capital infrastructure, as well as maintenance. Obviously, the annual compensation structure will need to be worked out, along with any term of agreement, renewal provisions, there may be other considerations, provisions, and clauses that should be explored once township staff begin the process of implementation. So to conclude, we're going to receive questions and comments from Township Council today. We understand that project stakeholders as well as members of the public will also be contributing feedback. And so we will be taking all that feedback and considering it over the next, I guess, week and a half or so until June 25th is when we're going to start the process of revising the draft study, finalizing it, and presenting it back to council on July 19th. So with that, we wish to thank Township Council staff and all of those who have provided feedback for our consideration to date. We recognize that there are diverse opinions and visions for the campground lands, which we believe has contributed to a thorough review of what the Lakefield Campground and Hague Point as a whole means, not only to residents of Lakefield, but also to people living across the township of Selwyn and beyond. We thank you for your attention to this presentation, and at this time, I would be pleased to respond to any questions of council. So back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So we will now go to question and answer period, and I will recognize whichever of my councilors puts their hand up first. Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it just sort of one question per council member on a rotating basis? Because I have a whole bunch of questions, but other people might have the same one.
Why don't you put forward a couple and then we'll rotate that way. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with regards to your page 5 of your report, you talk about 52,000 average annual profit to the township between 2017 and 2000 on the average. So I did some quick calculations. The campground has 128 sites, and if the township clears 52,000, we're actually generating per trailer or campsite just over $400 per campsite for the 6 months of operation. I know they pay more to the campground operator, but you talked about Orca, how it runs beaver meat. I'm wondering, did you do any research as to how much the city of Peterborough receives from beaver meat, or is that confidential information?
We were not provided with that information, but I'm sure that, well, I don't know. We don't have that information.
Okay. And then, so then the second question I have right now is with regards to infrastructural renewal costs in areas 1 and 2, because you said area 3 is not needed. So with regards to the renewal costs, would this be something that would be debentured over a number of years and be recouped through campground site fees, or would it be at township ratepayers' expense? Or do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, through your Mr. Mayor. I think there's a variety of options to recover that capital expenditure. I think realistically the township would be bearing the cost unless Orca or a private operator sees a benefit in contributing to that cost to improve the campground infrastructure. But debenture is one option. There could be a portion of revenues allocated to pay that back. And so, we've spoken to a few of those types of options to on page 10 of our report to what the municipality could consider. It's not my understanding, at least based on staff's, what we've heard through staff, that it would be a tax funded item.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. Other councilors, and we'll come back to Anita. Sherry?
Thank you, through you. Thanks, Anand, for a very comprehensive report. It's very much appreciated, including the recommendations on page 63. I just want to take further something that Councillor Locke said with regards to the infrastructure. The system that we have in Selwyn is we have user pay for water. And I would like Lane to comment on that, please, as it relates to the campground and investing money for infrastructure there.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, any financing plan is subject to council approval. But in terms of recommendations, how we've treated the campground in the past is it's operating as a business enterprise. And so therefore, any investments in capital, I would suggest, would need to be recovered from that business enterprise. So if there's a capital investment there in the campground, I would first look to recovering that from the campground operation fee. Because of the fact that it's the lands are owned by the township, that isn't something I would typically fund through reserves of the water sewer ratepayers. But then obviously any ongoing maintenance after the fact could be considered.
Carrie?
All right, and we've also heard the argument that 900 plus homes are going into Lakefield South, and that will increase the revenue for the township and the businesses. This may well turn out to be true, but the growth isn't going to be immediate. May take 20 plus years to reach fruition. And I use this as an example, the Lilac subdivision with 91 homes has been happening over the course of 4 years, and it's still not all complete. So in the meantime, there's going to be a loss of revenue from the campground for that 20 years, which benefits the township and businesses. Lane, will the expected expansion of Lakefield South be the boondoggle people are expecting?
You, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm not familiar with the term boondoggle for sure, so I don't know how to actually respond to that. I can say that, you know, councils of the past and this one has been working really hard to expand Lakefield South, and given the status of where we are right now, we're looking forward to growth in that area. Phase 1 of Lakefield South is about 120 units roughly. And it just depends on the market as to when that actually gets built out. But as anything, any of that new growth has expenses that need to go along with that as well. Now, the one benefit of Lakefield South is it's a fairly compact area. So it isn't like miles and miles of road. You're going to have a subdivision that's going to be put in place by the subdivider. And then we're back into a maintenance mode, right? So we're definitely looking forward to that growth. The amount of money that we're talking about isn't something that I would suggest we would make up in 1 year, but we would look at any other type of challenge like that and fund it and phase it in over a number of years. So definitely the Lakefield South area is going to provide us with revenue to do that, but it is going to take some time.
Is there not also costs involved with that, Lane, once the houses are in there?
Through Mr. Mayor, yeah, there definitely is. It would become our responsibility once the roads are assumed, sidewalks assumed, those types of things. Then definitely our crew has to go in and do maintenance. But as I mentioned, it's a fairly compact form in there, so you know, I think it would be an extension of a plow route in the wintertime. Some additional asphalt roads that would be swept first thing in the year, those types of things. So given the compact building form in there, I think that we're going to be in a positive revenue situation for sure.
Thank you, Sherry. I see Donna has her hand up.
Just piggybacking, first of all, on Sherry's comment about the costs involved in Lakefield South. I wonder, Lane, would you have at your disposal an approximate amount of money that we had to spend on just doing the water tower for Lakefield South, which was, I think, a considerable expense?
Yeah, well, definitely to you, Mr. Mayor, the water tower benefited the village proper as well, not just the Lakefield South area. We were actually fortunate there to receive federal and provincial funding on that as well, which covered, if I recall, about 2/3 of the cost. And then there is a portion of that that's definitely recoverable through development charges as well. So overall, the project was about $5 million. It included the water tower and servicing to Lakefield South and the water tower road. But really the cost to the ratepayers was very small. The development charges and the grants are going to take care of that.
Okay, that's good, thank you. Can I make another comment?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, Anand. And I want to comment on the comments that are often made that we need a lot more green space in the Lakefield area. But it's already been pointed out that we have a higher complement of green space in the whole municipality, and we have more than sufficient in Lakefield. And we have Isabel Morris Park that is not even completed yet. And we have a whole design from Basterfield outdoor design architects that we haven't been able to implement yet due to costs and various other reasons. And there are more trails and I just forget all the items that are outlined in that study. But Isabel Morris Park seems to be really underutilized. So I have a problem with making more green space in the smallest part of our municipality.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, Jerry.
Through you to Anand. Thank you for the report. I think it's been extremely well done. I don't think you left any stone unturned. I think you've listened to the people, and the group of recommendations. I think they were thoroughly thought out, and I think you guys did an outstanding job. That's it.
Thank you, Jerry. Back to Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Anand. I didn't say that earlier, but thank you. It is a very good report, as Jerry pointed out, very thorough. So I just wanted to comment. There was a comment made in one of the letters, and I won't read who wrote it, but it says, as residents of Lakefield, we fully support and am I on? Yeah, and will happily contribute to the restoration and use of Hague Point lands through any taxation levy that may be imposed, etc. And then on page 12 of your report, it talks about the $50,000 per year that would be lost operating revenue that the township would need to replace if ceasing campground operations. And I guess this would be a question for Lane. So Lane, if we're losing that $50,000 a year, if we close the campground, would that almost 1% tax increase across the entire township, would it be borne also by ratepayers of Smith and Ennismore, or would Lakefield ratepayers have to basically eat that whole $50,000 a year? Because obviously there are people that are willing to have their taxation levy increased, but I can tell you right now, there's a whole lot of Lakefield residents that simply would not be happy if they had to, if their taxes were boosted specific to the Lakefield ward to pay for the campground revenues if it was to close.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, definitely the amount that comes in from the campground offsets Parks and Rec costs across the township. So it's not specific to Lakefield. So those revenues would need to be made up in the Parks and Rec department across the township. Having said that, as I mentioned before, that isn't the type of thing that I would suggest would be made up necessarily in 1 year. It wouldn't necessarily be made up all through taxation in 1 year. And that's the type of thing that when we get to the budget stage every year, we review operational impacts, capital programs, and different things like that. And we present different options to council. So I think it would be really premature to say that any lost revenue would have to be made up through taxation at this point in time, until we actually looked at the overall impact and then allow us to put together some type of phase-in plan.
Nita? Or
Yeah,
Sherry?
well, sorry, I just wanted to comment on the Kawartha Chamber's response as well. I think that they have some, obviously they support the option that engages a local entrepreneur to operate the campground, but they do talk about some of the really neat ideas, like supplementary ideas or activities such as yurts, winter camping, canoe rentals and stuff. So I really hope that people listen or read closely what the chamber is suggesting. There's a lot of really neat ideas that they have with whether as a local entrepreneur, I guess, maybe as a private operator.
Thank you, Anita. Sherry?
Actually, piggybacking on what Anita said, not only would there be a 1% tax increase to close the park, but there would be another $60,000 or another 1% tax increase to decommission it. So it would be a bit of a heavy hit at the beginning.
Okay. Other questions? Jerry?
Yes, thank you. Through you, there's also the cost too. If we made this into a park of the yearly maintenance, somebody's got to go through there, cut the grass, and the trails. Do the trails right now meet? Imagine they would meet the AOTA standards and the trail, federation, if you will. And then if you go and add more trails through there, I think obviously there's a cost there. I know the Fairburn to the Fifth Line Trail, that was expensive to do and time consuming. So that's also got to be a consideration too. So not only may you lose the tax or the payment from the campground, then you add your decommissioning costs, then you add your yearly maintenance as well. So it's not just it's cut and dry.
Right. Other comments? Okay, I'm going to take a minute then to ask a few questions. Just give me a minute. There, I just wanted to get myself so I didn't have to hold down my space bar. So, and then again, let me echo my colleagues' appreciation of the work that you've done and the report that you've presented. First of all, I guess I'm the one who, and we weren't set up that way, that moved on and gave the answer that we hadn't considered Bobcaygeon, and we will. Thanks for pointing out that you had, but you hadn't reported on it. So I appreciate that. But the reality about Bobcaygeon, if I understand correctly, is although they've decommissioned or are suggesting a decommissioning, what they're actually going to do is have a substantial intensification of the use of that area, including a large number of docks. They're really trying to turn it into a regional tourism destination point, and with about what was it, 7.6 million or something in terms of new investment, right? So that's a very different perspective than what we're looking at. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head in terms of, one, it's $7.6 million. It's a major redevelopment. It also bears noting that Kawartha Lakes also, it previously operated 2 municipal campgrounds, and Bobcaygeon was a fairly small operation. So Kawartha Lakes has in fact retained its 172 campsite seasonal campground elsewhere in its community. And with the Bobcaygeon Park redevelopment, really their council had a vision in mind that this is a downtown park. It's prime real estate. They contemplated at one time even selling off the land, but decided that it's best to stay in public ownership. But the fact that there's a lot of boat access only islands, for residents in Kawartha Lakes, it's on a major waterway. They are intensifying that park as well with a lot of docking, from what we understand, so that people can come into their downtown, dock their boats, and again, from what their concept shows, an event space, manicured lands, a lot of built up amenities that one would find in a downtown park, aimed at increasing visitor load, park visitor traffic quite substantially.
It's not a naturalization of a previous.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think there are elements where they will, integrate, good practices in environmentally sustainable design and perhaps some, treat areas. But the function of this park is not a natural park. The function of this park is an urban park. Again, this is my interpretation of their concept when we see, the degree of hardscaping, docking, recreational amenity, and its intent as a social gathering space.
Well, thank you for that. And it's sort of related to that. I'm interested, the city of Kawartha Lakes, from what you wrote, made the decision, they felt it important to keep it in the land in public holdings. There have been a couple of comments that people have made that I've heard anyways, questioning the issue of using public land for camping purposes, which sort of set me back a little bit thinking about that, because partly from what you said, I think you said it today, there are over 100 different municipalities who in fact use their public land for campgrounds. And of course, when you think about it, the province runs a whole series of provincial parks, which is public land for campsites. And I can say that when I was responsible at the federal level for parks, that the federal government ran campgrounds at its parks. So I think it would be fair to say the use of public land to provide a campground experience is a service that is not all that uncommon.
You're correct. The report that we had referenced in the report found that there were over 500 municipal campgrounds in operation across Canada, a good share of which were in Ontario. So I think again, just as your parks are used for other recreational and social and cultural types of opportunities, camping is documented across the country as something that is compatible with park uses, provided that the campgrounds are, operated in a good way. So, whether it's a campground or a soccer field or something else, we would see that again, it's making use of the natural surroundings, and people, there is a portion of people that appreciate that amenity.
Right, and to your point about other types of facilities, and either yourself or perhaps I guess Mike's on the line there. I just want to make sure that I got this down. So the Hake Point environment precinct, I'll call it, is roughly 30 acres. That excludes the previously owned public land that the village of Lakefield, when it was an entity, sold to private individuals. But excluding that, it's about 30 acres. And of that 30 acres, about 25% of that is the campground. So 30 acres versus 7.5, doing my rough math, it's about 25%. But there is a significant amount of activity, very public, accessible activity that takes place in that precinct. We have obviously the trail. We've got the tennis court. We've got the ball diamond. Of course, we have the beach, which is public. We have the Marshland Center. We have Imagine the Marsh, and so the vast majority of that of what we refer to as the parkland that is Hake Point is used for a variety of public purposes. The campground is a specific piece that is provided, but it's part of a greater whole that provides a significant amount of access to the public. Would that be a fair observation, or am I overstating?
Sorry, Mike, do you want me to respond, or I saw you might turn your mic off or on?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to be ready. I'm okay either way. if we talk about the actual footprint that is used today, it's slightly higher than 7.5, because delineations, would be based on some point in the on the land, i.e., where the boat launch is. There's an area there that is access across the trail. So, how do you measure that out and include areas that are used by it? So it would be more than a quarter, but certainly nowhere near half of the point is the campground. It's probably closer to 12 acres of the 30 that would be campground support, and all of that. The rest is fully public land. The 18 acres that would be remaining would be fully public, available at any given time, and some of it is of that 12 of 30 that would be considered the campground, would be parts that are shared anyways, the trails that go through there and that. But that's probably the safest and most accurate way to depict it, because then there is no argument as to anything that the campers might be using or could be situated in.
Okay, thank you. And Ann, is that good, or did you want to add to that?
No, I think both the observations of yourself and what Mike just reinforced, there is a lot of public activity happening at Hague Point as a whole. And it bears, again, noting that the campground is public. There is a process in place for anyone that wishes to try to secure a space there, if the spaces are available, to gain access for that recreational activity as camping, or ball or tennis or walking, swimming. You're right on that. There's a wide range of activity happening for the public there.
Okay. One of the things that you said, and you may have said it in your last meeting, and I missed it, was that the campground is a legal conforming use under the Peterborough official plan. I think I heard you say that, right?
That's correct. It's a permitted use under the recreational open space designation for the county, but also Hague Point is identified as a special policy area where the county's official plan specifically talks about a municipally operated or municipally owned campground.
And I understand as well, and I don't know who wants to answer this, that the docks that are adjacent to the campground have been approved, their installation by the TSW. Do I have that correct, or am I missing that? And I don't know who on staff wants to answer that.
Sure, Andy, I can respond to that. We did receive an email from the Trent Severn Waterway that did clarify that they had reviewed the location of the docks and that they were in compliance with their policies. They reached out to us to provide that information because they had been directly contacted by some folks in the village with some concerns around that. So yes, they did confirm that.
Okay, and to Mike, I guess the various regulatory pieces that we have to go through. As far as you know, we're in conformity with all the regulatory requirements that we're required to adhere to the best of your knowledge, Mike?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, absolutely we are. In checking with any of the regulatory bodies, ORCA, TSW, and then obviously we have internal checks and balances. They're fully compliant with any of those regulations.
To you, and on page 58 of your report, you referred to unintended consequences of naturalization, and you listed a number of those. I just wondered, are you basing your what you said on other examples or other things that you've seen in your practice and across the province? Is that where you came up with those kinds of thoughts?
Yeah, there are parts of Ontario that we have experience in where naturalized areas have been challenged by illegal ATV use or snowmobile or mud trucks, that kind of thing. We are seeing in, again, more urban settings. I don't know if this would apply necessarily to Lakefield, but I think the potential exists that, persons experiencing homelessness, that is kind of growing in numbers across the country. And so municipalities are, kind of trying to contemplate how to address encampments in parks. And so, they're again, it's not that it's something that the municipality, has the potential to face if areas are naturalized. But at the same time, there's that ability to work with social service providers. There's the ability through design. There's the whole field called crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED. So, there are ways to kind of mitigate certain things through design. But if you think of it as, again, that one extreme side that we've identified in the spectrum, on one side, if it's a fully naturalized area, with little built infrastructure, it's a matter of how do you manage something like that, or urban wildlife, or wildlife in general. So these unintended consequences, we can't foresee them all. Some of them may not arise, but based on experience, one needs to be cognizant that there may be unintended impacts of, whether it's a naturalized park or a highly intense urban park like we just spoke about in Bob Cajun, that there may be implications that are different than what you're currently addressing at the campground.
Well, thank you for that. I have a question. I guess this would be Rob that might want to answer it, although, and you might be able to. The proposal that or the preferred option that you've suggested, which, given what you've been able to read, Rob, and I know that you would need to understand it better, but would that trigger anything under the Planning Act?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can you repeat that again?
So has put a proposal or a recommended course of action in his report. Council is yet to review it or decide on it, but there's a recommended course of action. And the question that I'm asking you, and you may not be able to answer this, if you haven't, may not have had the documentation now, but is there anything that you can see in implementing that, if that were the decision of council at some point, that would trigger something under the Planning Act? Would we need to undertake a Planning Act process?
Yeah, I guess what I would need to do is take a deeper dive, I think, into the recommendations, Mr. Chair, to be quite honest, before I could answer that with any degree of certainty. So, I'm prepared to do that, and I could certainly get back to you as to what, if any, Planning Act applications would be required to accommodate that.
What I might add through you, Mr. Mayor, is just, again, if the end use is different and that use is not in conformity with the county official plan, so it's another land use that's being proposed altogether, certainly that would trigger an official plan amendment process. But again, if proceeding with the preferred course of action, I mean, assuming all else is equal, and it's simply that a new campground operator would be responsible for overseeing the Lakefield Campground. I wouldn't, Rob will confirm this through his review, but because it's not a change to the land use, I wouldn't see a Planning Act process being undertaken.
Yeah, so sorry, that much I can confirm, Mr. Chair, that certainly the current use that's being made of the property is consistent with the policies we have in place. So, the preferred recommendation would not require. I just haven't looked at the other options that are in the report to give you a clear answer on those.
fair enough. I have two last questions. So one of the things that I noted, and with a little bit of surprise, because I had no idea, but you described a really escalating desire amongst the public to go camping. That is that a COVID aberration? Is that a long-term trend? Has the public changed its view?
I mean, as much as my wife canceled our camping trip this week, she based it on the 7-day forecast, which I guess maybe in hindsight, we're going to have a tent in the backyard now instead. Maybe we should have kept that reservation. But, I think even before COVID, Mr. Mayor, the way research was trending was that people are looking to camp more. Not only people that have already experienced camping, but also people that have never tried camping out in the future. And so, certainly COVID has resulted in a lot of pent up demand for many things over the past year. Camping was seen as one of those activities where one can keep physical distance. So you don't necessarily have to leave the country. And if one's a seasonal camper, a number of, from what we understand, seasonal campgrounds have opened because those campers can essentially stay within their units. So we'll see the degree of how strong demand remains in the future, but certainly there was a growing trend to people participating in camping more frequently or more often, even before the pandemic. So I think the future's bright, especially if they attract new populations. The future certainly looks bright for the camping sector.
The one of the this will be my last question, and I just want to rebuild on what Sherry and Anita said, and it's really for Lane. So Lane, help me if I with my math here. I'm just going to try to do this. So if the cost of infrastructure improvements, including, I'm just going to throw in a figure for interest carrying costs. So if I established it at 800,000, so if I did that to start with, and so if I wanted to have that recovery over 20 years, of course you've got your interest that has to be charged then. So if I divide 800,000 by 20 years, that means I would have to recover $40,000 a year, roughly. And I think we said 112 sites. Do I have that correctly? I think I read that.
128, Mr. Worship, Mr. Mayor.
128 sites. So that would mean requiring $312 per site per year, but they rent over 6 months. So if I divide that by 6, so to recover the full cost of the infrastructure, given that the same number of sites, would require a surcharge, we'll call it a surcharge, to the actual user of that site of approximately $52. That would be full recovery from the users, no cost to the taxpayer. Now, I know there's permutations and combinations, and it can be a little bit different, but that is in a very simplified way, Lane, about how we would go about doing that. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would agree. There are lots of permutations and different things, but the short answer is you're correct.
Okay. So
And if I might add, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I would just also add, part of the reason that the service delivery review last year talked about the campground and revisiting the operating model was that, we recognized the demand for camping, and again, there's lots of permutations that could take place, but presumably if you're opening up this operating agreement, you're also looking at your compensation, and potentially there is an ability to increase the revenue that the township is receiving, because the current rate is based on in the current agreement, it's based on a 2011 update to the agreement. And so, again, this is part of those permutations, but realistically, would the township, go into an agreement thinking They continue to want to receive the same amount of money that they always have, knowing that there's strong demand for camping, and knowing that there's an infrastructure cost. Or would you try to find ways to, increase that revenue share? And again, a private operator may be willing to, share that ideology, because they know they may find that the business model or the business justification still makes sense for them, even if they have to give up a little bit more of the pie.
I think it's fair to say, though, that Sherry hit it correctly. When it comes to the infrastructure investment, it's a user pay system. That's not a general taxpayer system. I think she said it succinctly. Just before we let you go, I'm going to ask council one more time if there were any follow-up questions they didn't get to. Don't see any. And I'm going to ask if there's any comments that Janice wants to make on behalf of staff, or to direct to staff to make. Or when I say direct, I mean recognize staff to make. Janice, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you've covered it off, and there's been a lot of really good questions, a lot of good information that's come out. I would just like to echo the thanks to Monteith Brown. Once again, I think they've done a very good job for us here, and provided a report that's got a lot of good information and something for us to work forward with. So thank you.
Thank you, Janice. So just to make it clear, you're going to, this is to Anand, you're going to close off your input on the 25th of June. So anybody who wants their input reflected in the report needs to submit it by the 25th of June. Clearly, anybody that's giving input to council can continue to do it past that time. We're meeting in July, but just so that everybody recognizes that if you're looking for your input to be part of the formal report, you need it by the 25th, right?
That's correct, Your Worship. Just in terms of we are targeted to come back to council on July 19th. So to work it backwards from that date and ensure that the circulation deadlines and everything are met. June 25th, which is a Friday, if memory serves correct, is the date in which we'll be receiving input. And I also want to just say before I close off, and I'll stay on the line, but like in terms of observing the next sessions, the speaking, the delegates, but I just wanted to reinforce the fact that, Todd Brown, Kent McVitie, and others at our firm, have appreciated this opportunity to work with all of you folks. And I want to recognize that they worked hard on this as well. But I also want to thank all members of council, as well as all members of staff, and the various people that have provided input to date. And we continue to look forward to those that will provide additional input. But again, for us as as people coming in to evaluate the options and trying to do so in as fair and a balanced way as possible, having that diversity of input has helped us prepare the report, and we're very pleased that you are pleased with the report, and certainly look forward to working with everybody to finalize this study in advance of July 19th. So thank you. Oh, you're still on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Mike, you took your mute off. Did you want to say something?
I think, and I actually may have just stolen my thunder. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I really wanted to thank him since I'm the one that's been doing a lot of the personal contact, but also reiterate what a great job they've done from the perspective of data collection, because that is what this process has been about, hearing as many residents and as many users as we possibly could before anything was decided, before anything was advanced, was the key component of this. And it's been tough sometimes because there's been suggestion that there in some cases that there should be more information or more decisions being made, but that would actually preclude the information taking and the opinions and seeking those. So it has been a great challenge that Monteith Brown and our supporting staff have been up to and exceeded because we get dozens of emails every day with opinions, which is wonderful. And that's what we want. But those had to be received. Those had to be sought out if we were going to truly have a decision that could represent what our taxpayers were interested in. So thank you very much for all you're working on. I know it's a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, and you guys, I think, have done an amazing job.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for those words. Thank you to everybody. We're going to adjourn now until 19 minutes to the hour. So that's 15 minutes from now. We will reconvene and do our 4 delegations. Thank you.
Tanya, if you're still there, would you like me to stay on as a panelist or kind of drop off and then just jump on the live stream? Like, do you have a preference?
Yeah, so just so that you know, I am still here, but it's still being live streamed as we're speaking because I can't
okay.
pause it.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I'll call you.
sounds good.
Okay.
So Tanya, are we ready? Excellent. Okay. I'm going to now move to the next part of our agenda. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 oral presentations and questions. There was also a written submission made by the Economic Development and Business Committee, which has been received for the record. And so I will ask for Robert if he could be led into the meeting, if he's there. Robert Spruill.
Hi, Robert, are you there?
Maybe he is not, he should unmute him.
Hi, Robert. We can hear you. Can you turn on your camera?
Hi, Robert. Did you get my message requesting that your camera be turned on? Is that prompting on your screen?
He appears
Seems to be,
he disappeared.
Okay, I'm just bringing him back in.
Okay. I see there you are, Robert. You got your camera on, but you need to put your mic on now. There's a little microphone if you in the corner of your screen. There you go. Now you're all set. So
all right.
There you go. You can begin now, and about 9 minutes in, I'll let you know you have a minute left. So go
Perfect.
ahead.
I've got about an hour and a half's conversation I'm going to do in 10 minutes. So
There you go. You're on.
good afternoon, Mayor Mitchell and members of council. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak to you. Before I begin, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the residents of Lakefield and especially those on Hague Boulevard for their continued support. Unfortunately, in some cases, references have been made to the people on Hague Boulevard that have not been in a good way. I have not met everybody on Hague Boulevard, but I have met most of them. And they are all very good people. And actually, with the exception of a few houses on the street, I believe they're all in favor of keeping the park open. And actually, as I meet more and more people around Lakefield, it's a little bit overwhelming how enthusiastically people support the park. I first became aware of the group Friends of Lakefield Park in March of this year. And frankly, I was pleased. There was pictures and stories about the park and trails and so on. I happily joined the group. As I read more and more of the articles posted, I realized there was nobody in favor of the park and that everybody was posting against the park. Now, at this point, I knew basically nothing about Facebook, but I thought it would be appropriate to write a little story about why I liked the park. I wrote about a half a page and posted it on the site. I had never posted anything on Facebook before. And the next day I checked to see if anyone had responded to what I had said. Not only was my article not there, I had been blocked, kicked off the site. I realized that something was wrong with that group. So I started a new group called the Real Friends of Lakefield Park. It was intended to be a place that invited everybody to speak their mind without being edited or kicked off the site. I guess I was a bit naive because I assumed people on both mindsets would post on the site their thoughts and we would be able to form a plan that would help everybody to enjoy the park. I regret that this has not happened, and in effect it has become a situation where it is us against them. This is not like a hockey game. In addition, in a situation like this, nobody really wins when there's a clear winner and loser. So although on one level, I'm here as a representative of the Real Friends of Lakefield Park, the campground group, I would like to think and hope I'm here as a representative of the entire community. A community is forever evolving Every day, somewhere in the community, two people or groups of people come to a compromise to keep the ball rolling. My background is predominantly in business and sales. In my later years, I studied alternative dispute resolution and mediation at Trent University. Experience has shown me that in most cases, if you listen to people, especially those you don't agree with, if you filter out the attitude, usually there is an idea that can be worked with and built on. Unfortunately, I do not see any chance for compromise with the group that is opposing the continued operation of the campground. My hope is that after you, the members of council, make your decision, and assuming for a minute that you do decide to keep the park open, then maybe both groups will come together and make our park the best park it can be. Lakefield Campground is good for business. The campground is home to roughly 100 families for at least part of every summer. Many of us live here full-time for the better part of 5 months. We acquire most of our goods and services locally. This is most certainly a positive boost to the local economy, but it is not just a boost to the business economy. The campground is also a boost to the township coffers. I was curious about the economics of the park versus a street in Lakefield. As you know, Hague Boulevard is on the way to the park, so it became my sample street. I did a check of the total taxes paid by the homes on Hague Boulevard. To arrive at a number, I used 3 original cabins, 3 fixed up cottages, and 3 new homes that were built there. I averaged the 9 property taxes amounts and multiplied it by 26, the number of homes on the street. The total taxes paid in 2021 after averaging will be $48,650. The total paid to township by the park in 2020, and I arrived at this $66,000 number by taking the gross paid to the township and just deducting the HST off. The number I got was $66,932. That is the difference of $18,000. If it costs roughly $10,000 to open and close the park and do minor maintenance, that still leaves a larger number from the park of $8,000. So from that aspect alone, it appears the campground is a financially sound asset, especially when you consider Hague Boulevard roads are maintained by the township 12 months of the year, including garbage and recycling pickup and snow plowing. Unless you call Lakefield Campground home for at least part of the year, part of the summer, it is unlikely you would be aware of how much effort is made by the staff management at the campground to protect the environment. Last year, park management implemented a new sanitary policy, which included mandatory use of a new Canadian-made holding tank treatment called EcoEthic. This product is approved for use in all municipal sewage systems. It is supplied to all campers in the park by management, along with instructions on how to use it effectively. On May 26th, I did a physical count of the trailers in the park. I counted 112. Of these, 46 are connected to the municipal sewage and water systems. This brings us to what seems to be the most contentious topic of all, that being the underground sewage pipes.
Sorry, I'm just in a meeting. I can't leave.
Tanya, you're not muted, so.
Sorry?
Go ahead, Robert, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. My understanding of the status of the underground systems is that they were installed in the mid-70s. Now that seems like a long time ago, but the reality is for underground service systems, this is not really all that old. There probably isn't a community in Ontario that doesn't have services pipes that are that old. These pipes have been checked and there's no leaks at this time. I would like to suggest that when the new manager's contract is renewed, a fund would be established whereby both manager and township would set aside monies for future renewal of the service systems, so that when they do need to be updated, the funding, or at least part of the portion of the funding, is in place. When you live in Lakefield Campground, you are living in a relaxed, crime-free environment. The people are friendly. Many of us are retirees from all walks of life, from company executives, professional and tradespeople, business people, and so on. There is also young working families, single moms and their kids. Basically, it's just a safe, great place to live. At one of the council meetings, I watched the speaker suggest the area could basically be reforested and allow the grass and undergrowth to do as nature would have it develop. I would answer that suggestion with, is this not what Isabel Morris Park is right now? He also just suggested that the area was short of what generally would be accepted as a given area per capita designated parkland. And so Hague Point should be turned into passive parkland. I have some concerns about what will happen on Hague Point should the campground be shut down and it turned into passive parkland. Passive parkland means vacant land. A good comparison to this being used as vacant land could be Jackson's Park in Peterborough. Jackson's Park is beautiful, and when my kids were small, my wife used to take them there almost every day as we lived very close. Today, she won't even walk there with a girlfriend because she does not feel safe. If you walk the trail there, it does not take long to realize what kinds of activity take place inside the park. The city works hard to keep it clean and the police patrol it regularly, but it's not unusual to find drug paraphernalia, used condoms, and trash strewn about, and recently even tents. Should this be allowed to happen here in Hague Point, it will not be a problem for me personally because I'll have moved somewhere else. But I'm certain that it will not take long until many of the people who walk the trail now will not find it as desirable as they currently do. Many people here are retired and planned their end years of their lives, including retirement finances and everything that goes with that, around the continued existence of the park. This is a community within the larger community of Lakefield. I can only hope that council will choose to keep the park open so that the community can continue to be enjoyed by so many members of the public, and not just a select few who would like to limit the use of to their own personal whims. Thank you again for your time. That's just about the most stressful thing I've done in 5 years.
Well, you made it in under the 10 minutes. Yes.
Well, good. I read as fast as I could go.
Very good. Thank you very much for respecting the timelines. So if you would just stay on the line, because there may be some questions from councillors. So
Okay.
I'm looking to my colleagues to see if there are any questions from anybody. I do not see any. So Robert, thank you very, very much.
It's fine. Thank you.
We appreciate your input, and you'll be put back in the waiting room, and then Michael will come out of the waiting room for his presentation. So I'll leave that to Tanya to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I think we have David Walsh next.
Oh, sorry, David is first. Excuse me. Thank you. I appreciate you pointing that out.
No worries.
Thank you. David from the Lakefield Trail Stewardship Committee. David, sorry. I tried to go out of order there. So,
David, you should have access to camera and mic right now.
I do start. Yep. Just a second here. How's that?
very good, David. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
I'll let you know after 9 minutes that you're getting close, but the floor is yours, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I want to start by thanking the mayor and members of council for giving the Lakefield Trail Stewardship Committee the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. And I'm going to begin with a short description of how the Lakefield Trail came to be and the purpose of the Lakefield Trail Stewardship Committee. And the relevance of this information will become apparent, I think, as I present our position in this discussion. So the Lakefield Trail was chosen as the Millennial Project to commemorate the year 2000 millennium. And it came about as a result of work by numerous volunteers who developed a concept of a trail through the village of Lakefield that would highlight the unique aspects of the village. This was a huge task, but the community got behind it, and today it is an integral part of Lakefield, and it's difficult to imagine the village without it. The Lakefield Trail Stewardship Committee itself was formed in the year 2000 in order to maintain and enhance the Lakefield Trail. Fundraising was started almost immediately in order to pay for trail maintenance, since Funding by the township at that time was limited. Now, since its inception, the Lakefield Trail, or the Lakefield Trail Committee, has facilitated the installation of over 50 benches, 150 trees, and a shade shelter along Water Street. As well, volunteers have contributed numerous hours and work days to help in the upkeep of the trail. We currently have 80 participants in our Friends of the Trail initiative who donate yearly to support our work. We have also organized trail walks in all seasons to encourage use of the trail and to educate the public about the unique aspects of the trail. The Lakefield Trail Committee tries to promote use of the trail not only through our Friends of the Trail initiative, but also through regular presence at community events. In a normal year, we would have a booth at the Lakefield Market where we would sell raffle tickets and share information about the trail. We're also present at the Jazz and Art Festival, Lakefield Street Sale. And through our Friends of the Trail initiative and our participation in the events I just mentioned, we receive a great deal of feedback about how people feel about the trail. Most of this feedback is positive, and we receive many expressions of gratitude for the work we do. There is no doubt from the comments that Hague Point has the potential to be the jewel in the crown of this trail. However, the most negative feedback that we get about the Lakefield Trail concerns the portion of the trail around Hague Point. The most frequent comment is that many trail users feel uncomfortable walking past the campground. Some say they feel like they're trespassing, even though this is public land, while others say they feel they are being watched as they walk through the campground. There are also some who avoid this section of the trail altogether for the reasons I just stated. Ideally, from our perspective, Hague Point would become a place where both local and visiting trail users would stop to enjoy an amazing natural environment, yet one that is in the middle of a thriving community, which is a rare feature for any community, and it sets us apart in the competitive tourism market. In the current debate concerning the future of the public land at Hague Point, we feel that the contract for the operation of a campground should not be renewed. Instead, we feel that this land should be returned to a more natural state. Not many communities have the advantage of having such unique ecological features such as the Lakefield Marsh and Hague Point, and this should be a major attraction for residents and visitors. This land could be redesigned as a resource for environmental and ecological education for local students, as well as the general public. Given recent events surrounding the legacy of the residential school system, as well as other issues that have historically harmed our relationship with First Nations people, serious consideration should also be given to collaborating with the local Indigenous community in order to promote knowledge of the history of First Nations people in our area, and to allow them to present their histories, traditional stories, creative arts, and cultural values to all who visit this site. This could be considered as part of our contribution to the ongoing process of reconciliation. If the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us anything, it is that Canadians want and need green spaces in order to maintain a healthy balance in their lives through their connection with the natural world. Ecotourism has seen exponential growth in recent years, and the COVID-19 pandemic has only accelerated this trend. With Hague Point, Selwyn Township is uniquely positioned to establish a reputation as a unique destination for this growing market. A recent deputation to council from Susan Willis-Chan and Sheila Potter provided many creative potential uses for this land that would make it a destination attraction and which would also support the local economy. With the recent designation of Lakefield as a trail town, Selwyn Township will be receiving much wider exposure as a tourist destination. The R208 organization that is overseeing the Trail Town initiative will be representing and promoting Trail Town communities through social media, brochures, and at tourism conventions. The major focus of the Trail Town program is the promotion of local businesses, and any unique attraction that can be promoted to attract visitors to Selwyn Township should be supported. A public park that highlights the recreational and ecological features of Hague Point, and that is accessible to all, increases the attraction of Lakefield and Selwyn as a destination for visitors and as a wonderful place to live. The Lakefield Trail is connected to the Trans-Canada Trail by way of the Rotary Greenway Trail between Trent University and Lakefield. This section of the trail is listed in the Cycling in Ontario website as one of the must-do cycling experiences in Ontario. There's also a new accessible trail being developed between Bridge North and Peterborough that will allow cyclists to ride from Peterborough and potentially continue on to Lakefield and then back to Peterborough along the Greenway Trail. Both Councillors Ballantyne and Heron have been involved in the development of this particular trail. Also, the Kawartha Land Trust is actively seeking to develop a trail that would connect Burley Falls to Young's Point and ultimately Lakefield. I say all of this to emphasize that we are already seeing the future growth potential for active, low-impact outdoor experiences. Selwyn Township should be looking at the increasing interest in such activities as a way to promote this community as a destination for the growing number of people who are seeking to enjoy the amazing lifestyle that we are fortunate to have in this community. We see in the repurposing of Hague Point the opportunity to engage the community in the process of developing a new vision for this land. We would suggest that the process that led to the creation of the Lakefield Trail, which involved broad community input, fundraising, the creation of a committed volunteer group, and ongoing upkeep, could serve as a model for the revitalization of the land at Hague Point. I notice as I read this deputation that I've used the word unique frequently. We on the Lakefield Trail Stewardship Committee feel that we need to acknowledge that Hague Point is indeed unique and that it should be promoted as such through the development of a public space that is accessible to all members of the community. Ecotourism is one of the fastest growing segments of the Canadian tourism industry, and a new environmentally focused redevelopment of Hague Point would place Selwyn Township in a position to take advantage of this growing market segment. I would like to finish our deputation with a quote from a Government of Canada website, which is entitled, "Creating Middle-Class Jobs, a Federal Tourism Growth Strategy." Spoiler alert, this quote contains the word unique. To grow and benefit from tourism, communities must exploit and develop the characteristics that make them special. In so doing, they will be better able to convince tourists to get off the beaten path, explore the lesser known parts of the country, and to visit during off-peak seasons. A competitive tourism sector starts with a commitment to quality and differentiation. This means that Canada must offer exciting, compelling, and singular offerings for tourists to see and do. If Canada is to be widely known as a premier tourism destination, unique products and experiences are vital to stand out in a crowded field. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate it. And thanks again for hitting the time mark. Thank you. Donna.
Yes, thank you very much, David, for your presentation. And I know, as you mentioned from personal experience, how hard your group works and what a wonderful job you have done over the years with your trail, your benches, your shade shelters, the work that you do on your fundraising. I was involved with a gala a few years ago, and I enjoyed it immensely and was very impressed with how you work. So thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you so much for everything that you have done so far and hope to do in the future.
Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Donna. Jerry, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you through you to David there. And yeah, nobody will ever take away what you've done for Lakefield, David, that's for sure. So I just got a quick question. Within the report, Anand had said there may be some unintended consequences in there. Should we make it a park? In Mr. Sproul's presentation, he mentioned that Jackson Park might not be the place it used to be. So what do you say if we remove the trailers out of there and now we don't have eyes on it? You say in your report, you've mentioned that, you know, people they feel like they're trespassing in there around the campground. So now if we don't have eyes on it, do you feel that would be a safer place, or what do you see, you know, could be the issues there? I mean, if people are camping there, you know, less desirable possibly, who knows? So I guess my question is, do you think it'll be a safer environment for people to walk the trail?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I go back to the presentation made by Susan Willis-Chan and Sheila Potter, that this would not be an empty space. There are several creative ideas for encouraging regular community use of this park, and we support that. So I feel that if we increase the interest in people visiting this section of the trail and the Hague Point, I think that the frequency of use is going to be a factor there will be many public eyes on it, and I feel that any situation that would develop which would cause concern for safety, or if the land is not being used for the purpose for which it was intended, I think that would be reported and quickly dealt with. So no, I don't anticipate that this would be any a place that people would not be comfortable going to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments? Let me just finish off, David. I have a comment and a question. So first of all, I want to echo my colleagues' comments about the work that you and your group have done. It's added a very special component to our community. There's no question about it. And I do have to admit that I avail myself of it on a regular basis, and have since when I first arrived in the community with a 3-day-old. I was on the trail, and now many years later, we walk as father and daughter. It's a special place.
Mm-hmm.
One of the really wonderful parts about Selwyn is that we have so many different things that make us special. We have our trail system. We have a group of small business men and women who are very dedicated to our community. We've got a Bridge North downtown, which is different and unique from the Lakefield downtown. We've got a heritage that is Ennismore, and what that means. We are at one end of our community, the south end of our community, essentially a bedroom community for a mid-sized city, and we sort of roll through farming community and then up onto the Shield to a cold water recreational. We're unique in so many different ways, and our strength is because we're not single dimensional, we're multi-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question is a little bit about the previous. Is there any way this conversation would be something other than either or, but simply let's add to what we have, let's make what we have even better, let's continue that uniqueness? I gotta tell you, I get very uncomfortable, and maybe it's just me, when it's somebody says, well, it should be this and not that, when the strength of our community has always been that we found a way to have both backs. That's sort of the point that I've been battling on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that certainly members of the Lakefield Trail Committee would be willing to sit down with whatever group to discuss ways to enhance the trail, to make the experience more beneficial to everyone who uses it. And I agree with you that we have to keep an open mind. I've been a member of both Facebook groups, the Real Friends of Lakefield Park and the Friends of Lakefield Park. And I agree with what Mr. Sproul said beforehand, that certainly the views are polarized. There is room for compromise. I think, for example, as a minimum, there should be a much larger buffer between any campground and the Lakefield Trail. And I think actually probably some of the campers would feel the same way. I'm sure they feel that we are trespassed, or that their experience is somehow diminished by the presence of so many people along the trail. But that would involve the campers also willing to make a compromise in terms of the number of sites, perhaps the density of the campground, and sharing more of the land with the community. So it does change the nature, and quite significantly, I think, change the nature of the campground as well. So yes, I see room for discussion, and if need be, yeah, a compromise. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, David. And again, to you and your group for everything that you do for our community. I think you see from council here how much it's appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I'll ask for this time, I'll get it right. It is Michael's turn. And so, Tanya, if you could let Michael in. Professor Chappell.
Hello, can everyone see me?
We sure can, Professor.
Thank you very much. Let me pull the presentation up.
Okay, and so as I said, I'll give the floor to you, and after 9 minutes, I'll give you a little reminder. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Council, for this opportunity to present to you about a very important public issue. I'm representing the Friends of Lakefield Park. My name is Michael Chappell. Of course, I presented to you before, but just to refresh your memory, I'm a resident of Lakefield, the Selwyn Township. My family's lived in Lakefield for the past 117 years. I do not live on Hague Boulevard. I live on the opposite side of the river. I can't see the campground from my house, but I know what it looks like. When I was a boy, that was the first place I went camping. I worked there as a student one summer in 1971. And in 1971, there were very few trailers. 90% were transient campers using tents. Almost nobody stayed the entire season. Not a single trailer was stored over the winter. So it's quite different than it is today. In pre-settler times, of course, Hague Point was used as a stopping ground by the indigenous population. And the reason was the rapids began at that point all the way down to Peterborough. And even the indigenous population was afraid to run the rapids, so they portaged around them. And it was Crown land until 1832, sold to the village as a park in January 1911. The cottage leases along the autonomy were eventually sold to leaseholders in the mid-90s. The campground began its operation in 1961, operated by the village until the mid-1990s. And since that time, the campground's been operated by a private operator. So the pre-campground state, of course, pristine, we know that. Indigenous population used to camp there regularly. There's a picture from 1906. But even when I was a boy in the 1950s, indigenous population were still camping there and providing guiding services for fishing and other activities in Lake Cachuanuka. At that time, in the early parts of the campground, Lakefield residents used it too. In fact, our next door neighbor used to camp in the campground over the entire summer because it was too hot at home. Nobody had air conditioners in those days. Few could afford to go to vacation spots like we do today. And it was a way to get back to nature and relax. So much has changed since then in my lifetime. This is the state of campground today. You can see the trailers are close together. On the left picture, you can see the land is compact without grass. It could be brought back, but it's destroyed for the moment. On the right-hand side, these are these laterals that we've been talking about. They're sewers because the sewer under the ground is broken. There's a hodgepodge of these things put in place to provide sewers for the campers that are there. This is part of the $800,000 that Andy was talking about that you need to do, whether the campground stays run by a private operator or if you decide to have the Ontario Region Conservation Authority run it. You can't get away from it one way or the other. Another picture of the campground. I just took this because it shows how close together they are. The previous presenter was talking about widening the campground out, giving more space to the lots. And I do agree, if you're going to make that decision, it's something to consider. I don't like this. Sheds left here, boxes left here, bags and parcels wrapped around here. It shows complete contempt for the property and the land. It was never the intention of Lakefield Campground to become an overwinter storage for people that camp there in the summer. But that's what it's become. I understand why it's become that way, but friends of Lakefield Park do not like it. And I don't know why we would tolerate it. On the right-hand side, you can see from space, these are the docks that are in place. Go back to it. These are the docks that are in place. You can see them here. Notice how this green line comes out here. This is what you call the Wetlands Boundary. The dock, this dock at least, is within the wetlands. Now, it has not been approved. The Trent Severn waterway does not cover anything except the navigable waterway, which is out here. This area is covered by the Autonomy Region Conservation Authority. And they have, as far as I can see, has never approved it. If they did, there'd be a permit under Regulation 16706 under the Conservation Authorities Act. I'd like to see it if it's there. I don't think it exists. And I can understand why it happened, but I think it's a travesty. Lakefield Campground isn't really a campground at all. It's a seasonal trailer park. Same trailers, same people year after year with few exceptions. These campground residents don't pay municipal taxes. They don't vote in municipal elections. They have permanent homes in other communities, and they don't have an enduring state in our community. The campground has been left barren and cluttered. There's no space for new visitors. 95% of the land is occupied by seasonal trailers. And the township does make a small amount of money from this arrangement, but they lose the use of this land for 365 days a year. By my math, that's 5.5 cents per day per resident only in the immediate Lakefield area. Now, Andy talked about averaging the costs of the infrastructure back. And yes, we could put an infrastructure cost of $400 each on the campers each year for 20 years and pay it back. But from my point of view, it's not worth it. The government isn't a business. We expect them to make wise decisions regarding our tax dollars. Nobody wants their tax payments to go up. We want to have decisions, though, that respect the interests of our community. We have a feeling that seasonal restaurants are have an undue influence on this. They have a vested interest in maintaining their status. We understand that. Our population in Canada is aging. By 2025, 25% of Canadians will be over 60. In our area, we know that we've already exceeded that. The use of Hague Point by older residents like myself is already disproportionately low. Children are spending less time outdoors, and they need more opportunities and activities to play outside. If we can create a space that's great for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, everyone will like it. We need to stop being rooted in this campground idea from the past and move forward. There's been 7 studies, not including the most recent one that you've just received today, in the past 53 years. 6 of them recommended removing the campground. Midland, Bobcaygeon, Perth, Thornbury, Collingwood, Smiths Falls have already removed their trailer parks. The additional homes from Lakefield South will double the demand. Population will increase by about 100%. The demand to go to the park will increase by 100%. So we need to adjust to that by creating comfortable spaces, amenities, playgrounds, pedestrians path, natural design. And no, I'm not suggesting that we build this path that you see on the right. That's just the path forward. Our group took some visioning thoughts around this, and we sort of agreed with some things that Monteith Brown already suggested, that as far as the environment goes, it's a place for all creatures, gardens, pollinators, community space, forestry plans, and so on. Healthy living, network trails, canoe and kayak rentals, nature walks, with programs in education, interpretive signage, educational sessions for children, ecology-based workshops, bee hotels, geocache points. Social benefits, creation of an amphitheater, an outside stage with a horseshoe-shaped logs for sitting. Some use of this area instead of Isabel Morris Park for some events. A destination, peaceful areas to picnic and have group activities, low-key activities by volunteers, literary festival, etc., movies under the stars, some paid activities. But it's not about our group to tell Lakefield what it wants in that park. We're only part of the answer. And we know that we need community involvement, and that it's going to take probably 5 to 7 years to make this happen. Is what we're asking unreasonable? Well, we talked about Bob Cajun. So I looked up what Bob Cajun is putting forward in their views. They're going to create rain gardens, a main concession building, washing facilities, non-motorized boat rental building, parks maintenance, amphitheater, arch bridge, artwork, paddle sports launch area, boardwalk, and riparian zone enhancements. These are all things that seem reasonable for a Bob Cajun, which is a much smaller municipal area than we are, although they're part of Kawartha Lakes, of course. But imagine they've got that. They have a pioneer village. What are we doing in this area? It seems like we've been left as second-class citizens.
1 minute, Professor.
In speaking for the future, we must hear the words and wisdoms of the past. And these are the words of knowledge keeper Dorothy Taylor, not me. Indigenous people have been coming to this place where the rapids were, into the marsh where the medicines grow, for a very long time. It is not sacred ground, but it is our traditional land, our territory. I asked for the land to give a message for you about how special this place is. The spirits of the land, the grandfathers, the trees, miss the rushing water, how it was originally here, like the island behind me, but it is all gone. We are able to repair the damage, possibly, but the spirits of the land feel stretched, tired of what they must put up with during the beautiful summer months. I can see many of the trailers have been here a long time, and of course, campers want to stay and spend their summers here. It is a beautiful place. But if the people had any respect for the spirit of the land, the water, the trees, the rocks, the birds, the fish, they would want to return it to the original paradise that it was. This is their home. Do we want to encourage them to come back? Yes. So I leave it up to you to listen to your own heart, hear and feel these messages from the original spirits of the land. Together we move forward and create the future. And I do mean together. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Colleagues, does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? Jerry.
Thank you, through you, to Professor Chappell. There's been some accusations, I guess, by some of the people out there that you folks have been putting a little misinformation out there, from what I've heard. So I just want to go through a couple things in your report here, just so we can make sure that, you guys are accurate and give you guys a chance to say, this is true. So one of in your Lakefield Campground is not a campground slide here. It says there's no space for new visitors as the seasonal trailers occupy 95% of the land. So are you suggesting that Hag Point, the trailers take up 95% of that land?
Oh, I'm suggesting that in the campground area itself, that most of the spaces are taken up by seasonal trailers. There is a little bit of overflow and there's a little bit of day camping, but most of that area is seasonal campers that have a trailer sitting on it.
Okay, but so it doesn't take up 95% of the land?
It doesn't take up 95% of the whole park area, but we're talking about Lakefield Campground.
Okay, so it doesn't take up 95% of the land then, is what you're saying?
What I'm saying is it takes up 95% of the Lakefield Campground. That is not Hague Park in total.
Gotcha. Mr. Richardson, Mike, can you speak to that at all for me? I just want to make sure everything's clear.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess that would need to be clear. The land which is being used as campground only, the suggestion is that 95% of that space is taken up by full-time seasonal campers?
Yes, that is the suggestion.
Okay, well, that would be inaccurate then. Even if we just took the number of transient sites, overflow, and the number of contracted trailers, it wouldn't be 95%. It'd be more than 50%, but it wouldn't be 95%. And then you have to take into consideration other places. There's the shuffleboard area, there's the horseshoe area, there's a play area adjacent to trailers 1 through 18 that all is campground. So if we talked surface area, probably would be slightly less than 50%, but 95, I couldn't, I couldn't support that or agree with that.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I think we heard Mr. Sproul talk about in his presentation that there was 115 camp trailers when he counted them this spring. How many campsites are available? I thought there was 130 or something like that.
If we call overflow or count overflow, if we count tents, and it would be about 141, I believe. But that is, again, it depends on because some areas you can put 2 tents in and things like that. So.
Thank you, Mike. Jerry, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Then the other is you're saying the township does make a small amount of money from this arrangement, but it loses the use of this area 365 days. Are you saying they can't use the trail 365, or are you saying they just can't use that campground portion?
Gary, we're talking about the campground. I thought we already touched that.
Well, you guys are angry. The campground revenue, you say, is 5.5 cents a day. So you're putting it basically the financial impact of it. Do you know what the financial impact to, say, Home Hardware is when everybody comes from the outside area to purchase stuff there? Like, I'm just trying to get a beat on what you think is a fair number for revenue generated.
Well, I don't have those figures. I've been trying to find those. Nobody seems to tell me.
Okay. How was the math calculated on the 5.5 cents?
Well, we talked about $65,000 a year approximately, and now we know that's less because of various other expenses that we pay. 365 days a year divided by about 2,700 residents in the area.
Mm-hmm.
This is an approximation, of course, because I asked for actual figures through Freedom of Information, but I was told that the campground operator wouldn't release the report. So I had to estimate.
All right, fair enough. Now, the other thing, I just got 2 more questions, Mr. Mayor, if I could. Some of your members of the group have been writing in and sending emails, of course, as has the other side, I guess, as we're calling it now. So do you think the council should base their decisions on all the information and what is good for the whole of the township? Or do you believe that we should make our decision based on the number of votes we're going to get?
Well, I think
or not get.
I think council's got to make that decision themselves.
Gotcha. Because we've received numerous letters saying that they're not going to vote for somebody who doesn't support the park. So that's what I'm just trying to, because I find it childish, but I think it's best if we make a decision for everybody.
I think next year the voters will say what they say, Gary.
True enough. So my last final question is we received a photo of the spring runoff at the boat launch this year as well, under the guise of destruction of Lakefield Park is how it came through, when it was typical spring runoff. Twisting stuff for a narrative to fit the narrative. Do you think that's right and fair?
I didn't see the photograph. I can't comment on it.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jerry. Donna?
Yes, thank you very much. Through you to Mr. Chappelle. I'm going to refer to some of the photographs that you had in your report about exposed pipes, refrigerators outside, numerous things that are unsightly. And I think it would be fair to say that if council did move forward with a trailer park on this site, that we would have to put in our agreement with whomever ran it, that we would have to have some type of property standards initiated, because I agree that some of the winterizing aspects are not attractive. I have recently walked the park this spring, and I felt that it looked very tidy and lovely, the parts that I could see from the main trail. But I do agree with your points in the winterizing parts of it.
Well, thank you. I mean, your consultant is recommending Ontario Regional Conservation Authority run the park. And I've seen the parks that they run, such as Beavermead. Certainly the standards of the way that the park is run and the way campsites are kept there are far higher than what's currently in Lakefield Campground. And I agree. I mean, a lot of what is creating the public angst in this is the rundown connection of the way the park has been managed over the years. I know why there's all trailers there, because when you have a trailer occupying a space for the entire season, you make more money because it never moves. You don't have to clean up. Because it's stored over the winter, you can charge for that. Next thing, you're renting a boat dock, which you're charging for. The municipality sees none of this money. I understand why it's become what it's become. But if the township is going to hand a contract to somebody else, you're quite right. They're going to have to build in safeguards this time to make it work.
For sure.
Thank you. Did anybody else have any other questions? Okay, I had, Professor, I had a comment, and then I'm going to ask a couple of ancillary questions. I really appreciate your passion and your view of things. I really do. But I think it's really important that we be working towards finding a common ground and getting a solution. And I said in a comment in my last meeting, I don't know if you were watching it, I said it really is important to take actions that bring us together and not drive us apart. I genuinely and truly believe that. And so I just want to, the people who occupy both longer term but short term spaces in the trailer park are a part of our community. They are. Many of them actually come from Selwyn. There's a whole bunch of them that come from Peterborough County. There's a lot of them that come from the city of Peterborough. And as you're probably aware, many of the services that you and I enjoy in Selwyn are actually supported through taxpayers' dollars that come out of the city of Peterborough. For instance, our ambulance service. But regardless of one's worth isn't based on how much taxes they pay. One's worth is they're intrinsically important to our community because they're in our community. And everybody's perspective is important. And I have a challenging time, and I'm sorry. I have a challenging time where we try to pigeonhole people into different components and different groups. So I just want to say that. But there were two factual things that I just want to check on, and I'm going to ask Rob because the comment that the docks require an ORCA permit. I'm not familiar with ORCA issuing permits for docks. And so, Rob, is that right, that would require an ORCA permit? I thought it was a TSW area. Rob, could you help me on that, or do we have to go to ORCA to find out?
No, I can answer that. So the Trans-Severn Waterway issues permits for docks within their jurisdiction. So that whole area around that peninsula is definitely governed by the Trans-Severn Waterway. The Conservation Authority would only get involved if there's work upland, Mr. Chair.
I think that, Rob, that you really need to read Regulation 16706, specifically Section 2, Subsection 3A. And that talks about any work within the adjacent waterway. And in this case, it's based on the flood line projection of 233.68 meters on Cachewanuka Lake. So anything within 15 meters of that flood line has to be approved by ORCA. Now, I'm not here to give you information on it, but I think that that's what you need to do is look at that.
Well, you know what we'll do is we'll ask ORCA. That's what we'll do.
That sounds like a
yeah. So let me just on the last thing, and it's just a really small point, but I just wanted to say it. So there's yeah, you did sign this. So it's something I got called "Our Planet is Calling for Selwyn Council to Restore Hague Point as a Public Park and Nature Area for All." And you made similar points that you made today in it. One of the things in it, though, is that you referred to the cost study, and you said that the cost study recommended decommissioning of the trailer park and restoring Hague Point as a public park. Now, I'm going to ask Angie, who has the corporate memory here. If I understood the cost study correctly, and I may not have, and that wouldn't be the first time I didn't get it right, is that yes, indeed, the cost study talked about decommissioning the trailer park, but recommended that in replace of it, that there be built a hotel resort be built there, not that it be restored to as a public park, which I suspect you wouldn't be supportive of. I'm just guessing that, but I'm guessing you probably wouldn't be supportive of it. But Angie, am I missing something? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that is 100% correct. The cause study recommended that the trailer park perhaps wasn't the highest and best use in that area, and recommended a resort and hotel be located on that property. The reference to the parkland comment was part of the public feedback that was received, and it was noted in the preamble to the report. But it's noted as well that although there was public feedback that the area be public park, there was also feedback that the campground be maintained. So I think it's important that people read the full report and provide accurate information and not parse just one particular statement out of it.
But to Michael's point, you're not supporting a hotel.
And Andy, I have to admit, I have not read every study. And I relied to some extent to people that said that they had. Obviously, we don't want to support that kind of development. But going back, I was aware of the 1970 Greer Galloway report, which was given to me as a teenager to review so they could get teenage comment on it. And that one recommended removal of the campground. The campground has been an issue in my life for 50 years. And it continues to be an issue. You were quite right when you say that we are all part of this solution, and the campers certainly have a voice in this. But the way I look at it is they're involved. The people in the community, however, are committed. And the difference between being involved and committed is quite simply, if you're making bacon and eggs, the chickens are involved, the pigs are committed.
I guess that's a fair way for you to look at it, and I guess I look at it a little bit differently. I embrace everybody in the community, but anyways, people of goodwill will have different perspectives, and that's just simply that. So I want to thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it, and taking the time and hitting the time mark right on. As a person chairing the meeting, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your willingness to field all of these questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Okay, thank you. And I will move on to our final delegation, which I believe is from our Parks and Rec Committee. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And it's, I think it's Carly. There she is. Okay, Carly, same thing. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. 10 minutes. I'll give you a warning at 9. So you're on. Go ahead.
Carly, you okay to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Carly. I'm a member of the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. This evening, I'm presenting on behalf of our committee our recommendation for the future utilization of Lakefield Campground. We've been engaging with members of our community on this issue, and we've explored it from many angles. Although there are some polarized opinions on what the future of this land should look like, through our discussions, we were able to move beyond those, and we're encouraged to find some common ground that the groups share. We see promising opportunity for compromise. What we're proposing today through our recommendation incorporates what we've heard. We believe that it addresses the key factors at stake and will help guide council to a decision that all residents can be proud of. Our recommendation is to develop a creative proposal for the Lakefield Campground property through a negotiation process involving all interested parties. This creative proposal would take into account all relevant information, including costs and benefits. It would be a design that would convert the point of the peninsula into a naturalized area. We recognize that this is an extremely unique environmental feature and it deserves our protection. The creative proposal would also redesign the campground to reduce density, creating a greater buffer between the users and renters. And it would manage the campground in a way that is more sustainable and compatible for the trail and potential park users. I want to thank everyone for their time today and hearing our recommendation. We've intentionally left a lot of time for questions, so I'm happy to take those now.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, with the screen up, I don't see everybody, but Anita, you went. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're talking about redesigning the campground to reduce density, creating a greater buffer between the users and renters. So would an example of that be, say, the trail area that goes, say, the trail between what is now the overflow camping to the shoreline overlooking the marsh? Would that be one of the ideas that you would have as far as redesigning the campground? Or the naturalized area park?
So first, I just want to point out that our role is primarily an advisory committee. So we would hope that this would be a process that, like we're recommending that interested parties come together and work on a proposal. So I don't want to speak on behalf of all the stakeholders involved, but we from what we've heard from engaging with people, they do want a greater buffer. So that would be something that we would support and advise on when we got to that stage.
Jerry?
Thank you. Through you to Carly. Good to see you again, Carly. Carly's one of the rock stars on our park and rec committee. And I should note, in preparation for this, Carly walked every single trail and hit every single park in Selwyn to get a feel for exactly what is there. So, and took some great pictures of those fiddle things or whatever the hell they were. My wife knew what the flower was. I didn't. Jack in the Box or something. Yeah, Jack in the Pulpit. Yeah, I've been known to be at the pulpit every once in a while myself. So David Walsh, who's with Lakefield Trails and sits on our trail committee, you as a committee both mentioned the word compromise today. So I think there's an opportunity there down the road, should it remain a trailer park, that, you know, it looks like there's some willing groups or willing parties, I guess, to talk about it and do it. And again, if that's to reduce the density a little bit, you know, but I think the biggest thing is people are willing to take that first step. And I think that's important, again, if it remains a trailer park. So I thank you and your committee. Both Councillor Ballantyne and I sit on that, and we stayed out of those meetings as to not appear to have directed or steered them. So this was all on their own. And again, I think that there's a great opportunity there for some steps should it remain. Thank you, Carly, and thank you to the rest of the group.
Donna.
Oh, sorry. Am I able to respond, or do I have to wait?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. You go right ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, first of all. But secondly, I just wanted to mention that the compromise doesn't come from us. It comes from the Friends of Lakefield Park and the real Friends of Lakefield Park, the businesses we've spoken to, residents. Like, we recognize that everyone, if you listen close enough, there is room for compromise, and people do want compromise.
Thank you. Donna.
Yes, through you to Carly. Again, thank you very much for presenting this, and I'm very impressed with the Recreation Advisory Committee in the way they approach their recommendation, because it's the most practical way in my mind, and I'm proud to be part of that group, so thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Any other questions? I don't see any. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you, not just for this presentation, but for your service to the community through your work on the committee. Our strength it lies in part in the fact that we have people like yourself willing to come forward and volunteer and work with council and with others in the community to arrive at good solutions, and as you point out, to provide sound advice and perspective for us. So it's very, very much appreciated. So thank you, and thanks for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, it is 5:47. We're going to take a 5-minute break to 5:52, and then we will reconvene and do the 7 presentations, and then we'll do a wrap up after that. So, oh, sorry, Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the public engagement is slated to start at 6 o'clock. So do the public engagement individuals know that we might be starting earlier, or are they anticipating that they will be speaking at their allotted time spot? I guess that's a question for Angie.
Angie, how are we looking in the waiting room?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we did let them know that there could be an opportunity for them to address council earlier. So they've all been made aware.
Okay, so if they're available in 5 minutes, then we'll go. If they're not, we'll wait. So it is 5:48, so I'll see you back here at 5:53. Thank you. would appear that Donna has left the meeting.
I'm just bringing her back in, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. There she is. She's returned. Isn't technology grand? Hello, Mary. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, so we're going to begin just in a second, but I'm just going to do a bit of a preamble. This is a bit of a new process for us. So, and this is brought on by COVID. We'd all love to be together, but that is not possible at this time. So, in addition to the formal delegations we just had, a number of people wanted to make some comments. So, we've got 5-minute slots. You're first up, Mary. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I'll let you know you have 30 seconds left. 5 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap up. And then after that, we'll move on to the next presenter. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to comment on the draft report. I am a camper. Al and I have camped our way both east and west in Canada, across northern Ontario and the New England states by tent trailer when our children were young, and now by tent. We've stayed in many national, provincial, state, municipal, and private campgrounds. I've used the Lakefield Beach since 1976. At that time, one showed a card, I think it might have been our dump card, to a toll booth operator in order to park at the beach at no cost. Visitors to the community paid a fee to park. A little bit of history there for you. In the early 1990s, the village of Lakefield was given funding by the province to build the Marshland Centre. It became a community space where not only groups, but families, businesses, and organizations could rent the facility to hold meetings, receptions, workshops, etc. When the council asked the community to suggest a name for the facility, the overwhelming suggestion was the Marshland Centre. The reason being you could watch, or you could be in the facility and see the marsh and even walk directly there. Now, trailers block the view, and if you try to walk to the marsh, you feel as though you were trespassing on someone's private site. It certainly isn't as attractive a facility for rentals as it once was. In 1998, residents started to plan for a trail, and it had been suggested in numerous recreation and Chamber of Commerce studies over the years. So the planning committee chose not to pave, but rather use limestone screenings for the section of the trail from the beach around Hague Point to the Imagine the Marsh property because of the environmental sensitivity of that entire area. The Lakefield Trail around Hague Point provided access to this wonderful part of the village for people who'd never felt that they should walk in the area of the trailer park. Yes, there was pushback from some members of the community, residents, and trailer owners on Hague Point, but we persisted, and in the end, the trail was approved, and now we can't imagine not having the trail on Hague Point. Since March 2020, we've been dealing with a pandemic, and our daily lives have changed. People have been walking, cycling close to home to enjoy some outdoor exercise and relax by the water and enjoy nature. We're so very lucky to be living here, and as the community continues to grow, we will only see increased need for places to walk, have a picnic, grow community gardens, and teach children about nature. Hague Point could offer all that and more to residents and visitors alike. Numerous parks and recreation studies over the years have recommended eventual phasing out of the trailer park, and the environmental planner from Autonomy Conservation cited this in 2004 in her comments on the official plan update. ORC has been an excellent partner with the municipality over the years, assisting with shoreline naturalization projects, managing the Imagine the Marsh property, and overseeing the Lakefield Drinking Water Source Protection Zone, which includes Hague Point. I want to thank Council for doing the right thing this year when you designated 44 Bridge Street as an historically significant building that needs to be preserved. Decisions like this are not easy. I've always felt that finances will drive the decision regarding the property in discussion. The taxpayers should not be asked to subsidize the renewal of infrastructure in the campground. Any municipal dollars have been collected for the good of all, for public services. This is not a subdivision where properties can be compelled to pay back the cost like a local improvement. The operator, leaseholders could defect on financial responsibilities, and thus the taxpayers are all paying the bill in the end. Council has the opportunity to enhance our community and preserve the environmental integrity of this parkland. The report recommendation to have Orca manage the property is an excellent first step, and I have great confidence in Autonomy Conservation's ability to fulfill the role. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Appreciate it. We'll now move on to our second. I think Ed is on the line. Ed, are you there? There you are. So just brighten up your camera and your audio. There it is.
Hi, Andy.
All right, so same thing as I've been telling everybody, I will give you a signal at 4.5 minutes to let you know that you've got 30 seconds left, and at 5 minutes I'll just ask you to wrap up, and then I'll ask Tanya to move on to the next person. So the floor is yours, Ed.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. My deputation is the document that I submitted to Council entitled A Technical Review of the Future Use of Hague Point, and the slide deck that I submitted. But I will just speak in general terms because 5 minutes doesn't allow enough to go through that. The purpose of the review was to consolidate information about multiple issues and of existing uses and the oversight of Hague Point as a campground and trailer park. It is intended to help Council and enhance evidence-based decision-making. And it comes from an extensive expertise and experience that I've had in managing provincial and national parks, including the oversight of campgrounds and campground contracts and operations and services. Very few, if any, provincially or municipally run or any government run facilities operate at a revenue generation once you include the cost of capital infrastructure. In fact, I'm not aware of any. As outlined in the report, there are many outstanding issues and gaps in information regarding the management and oversight, including legal responsibilities, financial sustainability, risk and liability, and environmental impacts. New information has just been tabled by the consultant's report. However, there has not been sufficient time to allow public to review this report to identify questions or concerns with the findings. At first glance, I would ask, what are we doing to assess the potential environmental impacts of the expanded infrastructure, including sewer, water, and septic systems throughout the Hague Point? And that's required before the development. Are there impacts to source water protection zones and Lakefield's drinking water supply and the beach? Also, in a previous council meeting, council had moved an option to, had removed the option to tendering the private operation of the campground. And now it's put back into the consultant's report as a fallback position in case Orca does not work. So I'm not sure how that comes, we can consider that an option if it hasn't been fully evaluated by the consultants or it was removed. I see Sherry shaking your head and giving me a smile, but it was removed by council from as an option, as my understanding. But so my recommendations to council is that given many outstanding issues and gaps in information, challenges with engaging meaningful public input during COVID restrictions, peak summer vacation and time, that many residents feel that the decision is being unduly rushed and recommended, and that decisions be extended to October 31st, 2021 to make that decision. Extending the decision timelines allows for information gathering, better two-way communication and community engagement. Recommendation 2, given that there's a significant capital investment and long-term commitment going forward for the long-term operation of a trailer park at the site, and that there's been no environmental impact assessment, and there's been no really evaluation of alternative benefits of public park to the long-term social, economic, and environmental benefits of the area. I would ask council to minimize and or delay commitments for capital reinvestment until we have full community engagement. And even as pointed out in the previous presentation, that negotiations involving all interested parties need to occur. And then the third recommendation is that many residents of Selwyn are frustrated by the lack of engagement of the community in creating the vision and the future best fits for the community and how this land could be used. And there remain many outstanding issues and concerns. And there are many environmental, social, and economic benefits of restoring Hague Point as a public park that have not been fully evaluated. And this needs to be done through an advisory committee to engage full public input. And I'm really dismayed by the head shaking and the smirks that I get while I'm presenting. And it's very, very unprofessional and disappointing.
Thank you, Ed. We'll now move on to our next one, which is Sherry Erickson. Jerry is there. Yep.
Hi, Sherry, can you turn on your mic?
There, can you hear me?
We can, but we can't see you.
Okay, there, that should be better.
Now we've got you. Very, very good.
Perfect.
So as I mentioned to everybody, we have 5 minutes. At 4 minutes, 30 seconds, I'll let you know you have 30 seconds left. And at 5 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap up.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. I have been a resident of the village of Lakefield for 32 years and a user of the Lakefield Campground for 14 years, mostly as a seasonal site owner. I'll start off by giving Mr. Guy Hanchett a piece of background on his property. Because he wasn't sure if his property was part of the leased land, as stated in his May 25th deputation, I checked into this for him. The property, known as 18 Danecourt Street, previously number 15, was the homestead to the Wilford family for approximately 50 years and was in fact part of the leased land parcel. In light of this new information, I will ask Mr. Hanchett again, should Hague Point truly be a park for all or just a park without a campground? Furthermore, when asked about the parking, if Hague Point were to turn into parkland, his response was, I'm probably far enough away that people wouldn't park down here. Although Guy states he wants a public park for all, I believe he has made it quite clear he only has his interests in mind and clearly not those of the 25 other dwellings neighbors on Hague Boulevard. Further to that meaning, Guy mentioned the township survey should just be open to Selwyn residents. This statement contradicts a post from a member of his Friends of Lakefield Park group who posted on a personal but publicly accessible Facebook page that just because they may not be a resident of Selwyn, they can still express an opinion. This was a direct comment to the survey link, hypocrisy at its finest. Due to the pandemic, mental health and well-being is at the top of many people's minds. As much as green space and exercise gives people the peace and serenity to unwind and keep a balanced level of mental health, the park provides similar therapy for its residences. For many, this is their home from May to October, with some seasonals returning for their 28th year. For others, it's their weekend escape from the everyday stresses of work and a busy life. It serves as a balance for many walks of life. Hague Point in the wetlands is enjoyed by many township residents, seasonal campers, cottagers, and visitors alike. As a resident of Lakefield, it is fantastic to see so many people using the trails, the beach, and both sports facilities. Unfortunately, due to COVID, much of the activity has dramatically slowed, but here's hoping for better times ahead. Contrary to some people's assumptions or opinions, the seasonal residents at the park also enjoy many of these amenities, exploring around the wetlands, bird watching, and listening to the sounds of nature. Most care deeply about this gem they call home. Many of you won't know this, but in a 2020 season, a Canada goose got ensnared in the wetlands, and luckily enough, A camper noticed, launched his canoe, and was able to free the goose. I hate to wonder what would have happened had he not been there. I do realize that there is a cycle of life, but this was a success story and shows the mindfulness of the campers with respect to the wetlands. Regarding permanent structures, decks, fire pits, etc. I haven't personally checked every deck in the park, but most were built with aesthetics in mind, are built on deck blocks, and are capable of being moved or relocated to another location if required, as point B in the township's trailer park deck bylaw criteria states. Further, I have witnessed many material swaps as campers are relocating to a different site, thus aiding in a reduction of the carbon footprint. Now the economics of the park. I was shocked to read in the May 25th edition of the Peterborough Examiner that one of the FOLP press releases mentions their concerns around non-local revenues. I realize that some members of the FOLP group have only lived here for a shorter number of years, so I will point out that the village businesses rely heavily on tourism dollars that thrive for 6 months of the year to sustain themselves and their families for 12 months of the year. Does this group propose that we cut off all non-local revenues, which will in effect implement a tax increase? I suspect not, and I personally not only welcome these non-local tax or revenues, but appreciate the minimized tax increases that these revenues offset. We don't know exact figures, but I will give an example on the extremely low side of spending.
30 seconds, Sherry. 30 seconds.
Pardon me?
30 seconds.
Okay, 117 sites, average of 2 people per site, a minimal spending of $100 a month each is over $23,000 to our village alone for 6 months of the year, a very conservative estimate. Further, did you know that of the 117 trailer sites, approximately half of the site owners are from our very own village, city, and Peterborough County, thereby tax-paying citizens to the various levels?
But I have to ask you to wrap up, Sherry. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, but we appreciate
Thank you.
it. Okay, if we could move on to David, I think is next.
David's just reconnecting, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think I see his name there on my screen now. So whenever you can, David, turn on your mic and your TV. Oh, there you are. You're still muted, so you may want to just click yourself. Still
unmute.
There you go. Now we can hear you. As I mentioned to everybody, 5 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning, and then at 5 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap up. So the floor is yours, David.
Mr. Chair.
I think I see his name there on my screen now.
Hi, hello everyone. I want to offer my. Can you hear me? No. Oh, you can hear me now. Good. Okay, thank you.
You're still muted, so you may want to.
I'm still muted.
Just a second, David. Hold on. We have a technical problem. For whatever reason, my voice is 20 seconds behind. 5 minutes. I'll give you.
Sorry, Mr. McRobert, do you have it on YouTube as well?
Wait, maybe. Oh, yes. Hold on a second.
So if you can turn that one off, we won't hear the echo.
I want to. Okay. Hold on a second. Can you hear me now? Okay. How's that? Is that better?
That's good. Isn't technology wonderful? So we'll start over again. I've cleared the clock. So the floor is yours. 5 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning, and then at 5 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap up. So go ahead, David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to all of the council. I commend you for the degree of consultation you're doing, and I express this from the point of view of someone in government who oversaw one of the roles I played at the Environmental Commissioner as senior counsel there. was to review consultation undertaken by all the ministries in the Ontario government and report every year. We report it every year to the legislature. And quite frankly, I happen to think you're doing a good job on a very tough issue because, you know, to be honest, the campground has been around for 50 years plus. These people who stay there, they feel like this is their cottage. And you can imagine how serious I think there's a couple of elements of what's transpiring here. I think there's a degree of hurt from those people. They have spent money here for decades. They feel like it's home. And that's understandable. You know, those of us who enjoy Lakefield love it too, and we appreciate all the amenities that are offered to us. You know, I'm someone who takes advantage of the of Kachewanuka Lake as much as I can. In fact, if I wasn't here right now talking to you, I'd be out kayaking. And I swim, and you know, when my daughter comes up to visit me from Toronto, I take her out swimming at the beach. I enjoy taking walks around the park and Hague Point. And it's really been a delight to see everyone out and enjoying nature in the last few months. Well, actually, really in the last year and a half since the pandemic started. So I very much approach this from the point of view of the fact that there has to be a compromise there, and what's needed is to evolve a vision, and implementing the vision will take a few years. You know, let's just say, I propose in my brief that that there could be a gradual phase out of the permanent trailer park. I think that has to happen. There's a lot of unhappiness with the fact that you have the trailer park with all of the with all its growing amenities there, you know, because people who are using the trailer park, as I said, are starting to use it like their cottage. So they put up bird feeders and have decks, and you know, they're all. I half expect some of them to start bringing all sort, you know, like maybe I don't know, like actually I won't go there. I'll just cause problems. So I guess all I wanted to say is we have to think about what Lakefield could look like in 50 years. It could have 25,000 residents. Hague Point would be the jewel of Lakefield. And so let's make sure that it becomes that. Now, that doesn't have to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. And we don't have to make it happen overnight. We can think about other opportunities for the park and how it's developed. I'm very pleased with the report from the consultant that recommends Orca take over the site. And I think that the municipality can work closely with Orca. I appreciate the fact that, yes, it's expensive to have public civil servants running facilities because you have to pay them greater wages than you pay. If you're a private sector operator, you don't necessarily pay people at the same rate that you would pay public sector employees and provide them with the same kind of workers' compensation coverage and all the things, even though legally you should, but that's another story. So I think that there will be challenges, and it's not, you know, I wish that I had a plan and a vision for you to hand today. I don't think that any of us do. I think it's something that's going to evolve. So, okay. But my overall point, I guess I would say, is I think that council, you're on the right track. I think the vision of engaging with Orca is the best idea. I think that a long-term vision of reduction of the number of sites is a good one. And I also think, as I set out at the end of my brief, why not explore alternate sites to move some of the campground? So in other words, why not find other locations, not necessarily adjacent to the water? What's that?
I'm going to have to ask you to end there because we've run out of time. So
Yes, okay. In any case, I think I've sent you an executive summary of my brief, and you have the longer version, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Yeah, well, we do have it. We do have your brief. It's part of the record, and if people have any comments, I'm sure that they will contact you. But thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. We'll now move on to Kirk. I think is next. Is Kirk on the line?
Mr. Chair, we have someone on the line whose phone number is 3003. I'm not sure if that's Kirk or not.
It is Kirk.
It is Kirk. Okay. So you're calling from a landline, is that correct, or a cell phone?
A cell phone.
Okay. So you won't be able to move him into the room, but you can hear him, counsel?
I can, yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, Kirk. Same thing as I said to everybody. 5 minutes with 30 seconds left to go. I'll just give you a little cue, and then at 5 minutes, I will ask you to wrap up. So the floor is yours. So go ahead.
Perfect. I would like to thank council for giving me the opportunity to share my opinions regarding the Lakefield Trailer Park. I present this on behalf of myself and my wife, Amanda Kennedy. It is important for the citizens of Lakefield to reclaim public spaces. Besides this matter before council, there is also a proposed 966 unit development adjacent to Coyle Crescent. Stats Canada estimates that there is 2.9 people per household. When this development is complete, there will be over 2,800 new residents of Lakefield. Where will these people go? We need additional public natural spaces to ensure an adequate quality of life for all. Surrounding yourself with nature is both physically and mentally important. The health benefits are immeasurable. My issue with the trailer park is the inequality of access. Not all people can afford a place carved out of nature, let alone rent a cottage or trailer. Nor can some drive to the Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park or Silent Lake. We have to make sure all people have access to natural areas right outside their door. This is the reason why my wife and I moved to Lakefield. It is a small village surrounded by nature, and we want more of this. When we first moved to Lakefield, we were not aware that the trailer park was actually a park available to the public. We assumed, based upon its appearance, that it was a private business. It is not inviting. Even the tennis court or the marshland trail, we are not aware until recently that we could actually use it. It doesn't feel like it's meant for the public. It feels like it's meant for a private business to operate for profit. I just want to close by saying reclaiming public natural spaces is no more important than now. We face climate change, wetland destruction, and species endangerment. The only way to stop this is to provide the people of Lakefield the opportunity to explore more nature outside their door. We see the interconnectedness of all of us. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my opinion.
Thank you, Kirk. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will then move on to our next presenter, Glenn. Is Glenn available?
Mr. Chair, Glenn doesn't seem to be with us. I have moved the next presenter, Ken, I believe, into the room.
Okay, Ken, if you want to liven up your camera and turn on your microphone. There you are. So I'll say the same as I did to everybody, 5 minutes. I'll give you a little cue with 30 seconds left to go, and at 5 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap it up. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I feel like, a little bit like the last speaker at a conference on a Friday afternoon. Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My family has been seasonal campers at the Lakefield Campground for 21 years. Now my 9-year-old twin grandsons call it their most favorite place on earth. But that's all I'm going to say about my attachment to the campground to the very end. Through my time there, we have met many campers who see the campground as an affordable, family-friendly, conveniently located and clean accommodation in Lakefield when they take in one of the music festivals or the Lakefield Fall Fair. No, these families are not there for the season, but maybe just a week or weekend to one of the, I counted this just the other day, 20 to 24 of the transient sites. But they do want the camping experience. The hot dogs over the campfire, swimming, fishing from the shoreline, walking, biking, and meeting others with similar interests. Prior to the pandemic, most roofed accommodations and other campgrounds have minimum stay requirements, especially during the high tourism season, which is not what these families are looking for. These families patronize the local businesses for supplies, fuel, restaurants, as well as take in other attractions while in the area. So where these visitors stay without the campground? The closest alternative would be Peterborough, which is where most of their spending would occur. Or would they just decide to go elsewhere? As the pandemic subsides and the concerts and festivals and fairs return, what is the message that someone wishes to send in an era when, as we heard, camping is booming as a popular summer vacation for families of all ages? With regard to the financial and infrastructure situations under the present agreement, and as you've heard many connotations on, revenue from the campground less the cap reserve is sufficient to fund 80 to 90 weeks of student employment for township programs. Much has been said and written about the infrastructure, in particular the sewage system, the camp that serves the portion of the campground, and the fact that it is approaching the end of its economic lifespan. But is this any different than a good portion of the subsurface and structural infrastructure across Ontario and Canada? If the sewer system becomes a problem, mothball it, and until such time as the township is satisfied that there are sufficient funds to finance the replacement. The balance of the campground is especially well served using a sewage wagon, as my own site is. The washrooms are as important to the beach as they are to the campground, if not more so. Remember the situation in 2020 when the beaches were open and the washrooms were closed. The pathway around the campground is well used now by the public to walk, dog walk, jog, bike along the water's edge, which is a feature that is and always will be what attracts the public to the trail around the campground. My family sees ourselves, and we always have seen ourselves as stewards of the campground and surrounding areas, including the public service, provincially significant wetlands. Sorry. It is our best interest. It is in our best interest that of our grandchildren to see it that is respected and well maintained. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, Ken. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I think that completes the all of our presenters. Is that right, Tanya?
Oh, that's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so colleagues, just before I give everybody a chance to say something, and you don't need to say something, but if you want to, you can. I just want to clarify a point. I think Ed was a little taken aback with what he thought was smirks. They weren't smirks. What they were consternation, because there was some confusion. What council took off the table was the option of running it ourselves as a township. We did not take off the table contracting it out to a private sector. So what I think Ed was seeing was that people were confused by the point that was being made, because that's not what council has done. That wasn't what was taken off. And look, there's so much stuff going on, and there's so many reports and everything. It's easy for folks to lose track of, but I thought it was important to just clarify that the three options that remained on was the Orca option, the private sector option, and the close it option. Those were the three that continued. The option of the township running it directly itself was taken off the table. Anyways, I just thought I'd clarify that, just so that everybody was aware of it. Okay, having said that, I'm going to do a wrap up, but before I get into that, I'm going to ask if anybody wants to add anything else. Okay, I don't see anybody. Oh, Donna, okay. There you go.
Thank you very much. I keep getting these strange things happening here. I just had a few comments. Council has been asked to provide an open, fair, and transparent process regarding the campground decision, and I believe that we are doing just that. And many people tonight have offered some very good suggestions and promoted an atmosphere of compromise, which I really appreciate. However, I do not believe that all members of the public are conducting themselves in an open, fair, and transparent manner. Now, some of these are hearsay and some of them can be proven. Examples are stories that people are being blocked from posting thoughts and viewpoints on some social media sites. Council have received threats that we would not receive votes in the 2022 election if we took a certain viewpoint on this issue, as well as some business owners have been threatened of a loss of business if they demonstrated a certain position. Other members of the public have sent anonymous letters to us because they feared backlash from neighbors and other residents. People are continuing to belabor points that we have proven to be incorrect. Examples of that are the dock construction and placement, which Trent Severn have approved for the 2021 season. And I think that we discussed tonight that we would involve Orca in that decision as well. And then we keep hearing the point that there's not enough parkland per capita, and we have demonstrated that there is. So those are just my concerns that keep going around and around, and hopefully a more positive approach can be taken from tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Donna. That's a really good overview. With regards to the 605 presentation, so Ed's presentation, I'm going to email staff with some of my questions just to get some confirmation with regards to some of the comments that are made in that presentation, because I know that, as Donna said, there's been some what we, possibly incorrect information, but I will be letting staff know that I'll send, and I'll actually CC it to all of council. Also, do we need to have a motion to receive each of the individual things, or are we going to take a motion to receive everything at once?
I'm going to put it to folks that will do a global motion to receive everything we've heard today. Anybody else have a general comment that they would like to make? Okay, no. Okay, Sherry.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Councillor Ballantyne. There's been a common thread of people we've heard from today who seem to be willing to compromise, and we do have the opportunity to do so. I think that there have been a lot of really good recommendations made as well that can be taken into consideration. And although we're not making any decisions tonight because we are hearing further presentations, there is an opportunity if we decide to keep the campground to make it a better place. We could increase the ability to use the area by renting out canoes and kayaks and providing storage for private kayak owners. And we could also have increased picnic areas in the vicinity near the Marshland Center. And there are a bunch of, that's just a couple of examples, but there are a bunch of them that we have heard. And I'm not prepared at this point in time to give a decision because, as I said, we're not through the process yet, but I think we're making progress.
Thank you, Sherry. Jerry, did you want to make any closing comments?
Yeah, I until we get to the decision point, I think I'm going to reserve on all my comments until we make that final decision, and then I'll address everybody.
Okay, so that leaves it to me, and I'm just going to make a few closing comments. I'm not going to be that long. I join my colleagues in thanking everybody for presenting today. We've heard lots of different perspectives. We've also received a lot of different correspondence, and so there has been a lot of consultation. I do think we're making a good effort to try to do that. Just to mention to folks, we have a special meeting scheduled in July, at which time we will come to a final decision. I want to note Anand's note to everybody, though, if you want your particular input included in his report, you've got to get that in by the 25th of June. Obviously, we'll continue to take input after that as a council. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, I want to mention, so as Sherry pointed out, and others, council is not making a decision tonight. That's not what we're doing. But we've heard lots of input from folks about the proposal, which is the consultant's recommendation is to engage with Orca. I think what we've heard is a number of different perspectives that would have to be looked at going forward, and something we need to do. I think one of the conversations we had was about the infrastructure, and that I think the deputy mayor made the point. It's got to be a user pay system. This is not something that we're looking at the taxpayer. So we'll have to go through what that would look like. I think there was a couple of comments made about making sure that there's a standard of care that's exercised in the park, and so I think we heard some comments about. That. We had quite a conversation about docking, and I think we would need to deal with that. I think Sherry just mentioned adding a service like kayak rentals or canoe rentals, and providing that, and there may be other types of services that we may want to look at. I think there's a bit of concern about the keeping a separation between the campers and people on the trail, and there's a number of ways that I think we would need to look at that. You know, the impact of overflow camping. Is there an opportunity to put up vegetation screens, that type of thing? So I think there are things like that we need to look at. I mentioned other amenities, maybe interpretive signage, things like that that celebrate all that part of our wonderful township is. I think there was a lot of conversation about density, and so I think reviewing density is probably something that we may want to take a look at. But all of that is just sort of a very quick recap of the kinds of ideas that people talked about, and it was good to see that many people came with ideas. So we're going to go through this process. I believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's July 19th is our special meeting. I'm terrible with dates. Somebody correct me.
That's correct.
Thank you. It'll be July 19th, and we'll do a bunch of work between then and now. And I just want to thank my colleagues. So we're at 3 hours and 38 minutes, and I appreciate the fact that you're all making this substantial commitment. I got to say to everybody, council takes this issue seriously. We're very engaged on it. We have a desire to hear from folks. That's what we're trying to do. And look, this is a great community made up of great people, and we're having a community conversation about moving forward in as inclusive and as meaningful a way as we possibly can. That's what we're trying to do. So having said all that, I'll entertain a motion to receive all of the reports that that came tonight. Somebody want to move that? Donna and Anita. All those in favor? Aye. And the last thing we need to do tonight is Jerry moves a motion to adjourn and Sherry seconds. Oh, do we need a confirming bylaw? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Sherry's moving the confirming bylaw. Anita's seconding the confirming bylaw. All those in favor of the confirming bylaw. Okay. Then Jerry is moving that we adjourn, and Anita is seconding that. All those in favor. Thank you, colleagues. Have a good night. We'll be talking to you all soon. Everybody stay well and stay safe.